Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. It has been 7 long years since we have last seen our hero. He had matured greatly in mind and body. Naruto now stood at an impressive 5 feet 8 inches. His muscles were very defined. His entire outfit had changed completely. He wore skin-tight pants that were completely white. He now had a hood that was also completely white. The pants and jackets were gifts from the Panther clan. Flashback. Today was a week after Naruto's 10th birthday. He spent his birthday with Hiruzen, Asuma, and Anko. It was a lot of fun and he had received great gifts. But the gift he was really looking forward to was the Panther's clan gift. Mayanaka had told him a week ago that they were preparing his gift. Now Naruto stood in the clearing where he and Mayanaka usually trained. He was waiting for the specified time to come when he could summon Mayanaka. Naruto watched impatiently as the sun slowly set. He sighed in relief as the sun got to a certain point. Naruto bit his finger and started to go through the hand signs for the summoning jutsu. He slammed his hands on the ground and a seal array spread on the clearing floor. A puff of smoke appeared and Naruto waited patiently for the smoke to clear. Mayanaka came out of the smoke with a scroll in her mouth. She walked slowly up to Naruto and dropped it at his feet. This is a gift from the entire Panther clan. Each one of us thanks you for being our summoner. Mayanaka said. Naruto grinned and then picked up the scroll. He channeled chakra through the scroll and a puff of smoke surrounded his hands. When the smoke cleared, Naruto realized that he had 2 new things in his hands. It was a completely white jacket with completely white Anbu pants. Try them on, Mayanaka said. Naruto grinned and then tried on the new clothes. He found that they fit perfectly on him. But he looked up with confusion at Mayanaka. Well, while I do appreciate the clothes, these aren't really made for stealth, Naruto said. Mayanaka smirked when he heard Naruto say this. Channel chakra into the clothes, Mayanaka said. Naruto looked in confusion at the request but did it anyway. He started to channel chakra into the clothes and looked at them. He watched in amazement as the clothes changed colors before his eyes. He noticed that they were perfectly matching up with the forest surrounding him. Those clothes were outfitted with seals that allow them to change colors. This is perfect for any stealth mission, Mayanaka said. Naruto grinned at his amazing gift. He knew that this would be a great asset for his stealth. Thank you, Mayanaka. Tell the rest of the clan that I really appreciate the gift, Naruto said. Mayanaka nodded and then disappeared. End of flashback. Naruto had foregone showing anyone his new clothes. He didn't find it necessary so just decided to keep it to himself. Several other things had changed about Naruto too. Naruto now had almost complete mastery of his electromagnetic field. He could extend it to over 200 yards and retract it to 5 inches from himself. His sword skills weren't his strong suit but he was still skilled with it. With no base style he relied purely on his instincts. It had worked for him since he got the sword so he found it unnecessary to change it. But Naruto's greatest strengths were his speed, stealth and his lightning jutsus. Due to the constant speed and stealth training Mayanaka had forced him through, his speed and stealth were off the charts. He was able to sneak into the Hokage Tower several times wearing bright orange and not be seen. He was able to someone quick enough that they wouldn't notice till it was too late. His lightning jutsus had come a long way from him not knowing how to control them. He was able to shape the lightning into any shape or form. If he channeled chakra into hand and touched someone, he could fill them with enough excess electricity that he could knock them unconscious or them. It was basically a built-in taser. Overall Naruto was at a solid Chunin level. Due to his lack of strength, he wasn't able to reach Jonin level. Today was a very important day in Konoha. Today was the day that Konoha would welcome in a new generation of ninja. This generation was made out to be the best in several generations. They were mostly made up of the future clan heads of Konoha. It was also so the class Naruto was in. While today was a very important day for Konoha, it was not very important for Naruto. Naruto was not really looking forward to his first couple of months as a genin. After hearing about the missions assigned to fresh genin, Naruto was definitely not looking forward to them. Naruto was in his room making sure he was completely ready for the test. He had his special kunai on the inside of his jacket. His sword hung loosely against his back. Naruto, satisfied with his equipment check, put a senbon into his mouth. He slowly walked out of his room and walked out of the house. Once he got outside, he threw his hood and started to channel chakra into them. Slowly his body seemed to disappear. After making sure he was completely invisible, he made his way to the academy. At the academy, Naruto quietly snuck into the academy and into his assigned room. He took a seat in his usual desk and waited. He was an hour early, so he had plenty of time to wake. The first person to enter the room after Naruto was Iruka. Naruto's relation with Iruka had not improved at all. Actually, it had probably got worse. As Naruto grew older, he became more rebellious and began to strike out towards Iruka's biased behavior. "Why don't you just him now? It would save us a lot of trouble," Kyuubi said. One thing that hasn't changed about Naruto was his relationship with Kyuubi. Kyuubi still tried to influence him with suggestions of raping and pillaging. Kyuubi still manipulated his dreams to show horrors. But Naruto survived through it all. Iruka went straight for his desk and took out a packet. Naruto, being the curious person he was, quietly walked over to the desk and looked over Iruka's shoulder. His eyes widened when he noticed that the papers Iruka had taken out was the test Naruto was scheduled to be taking today. Naruto grinned at his luck as Iruka took the test himself. After 20 minutes, Iruka finished the test, put it back into his desk and walked out of the room. After making sure that Iruka was gone, Naruto quietly took the test out of the desk and copied down the answers on a separate piece of paper. When he finished, he put the test back into the test and sat back into his seat with a content smile. Now he was waiting for his classmates. The first one of his classmates to enter the room was Sasuke Uchiha. Sasuke Uchiha was a very popular boy in the academy. He stood 5 feet 5 and his build was that of a swimmer. He had black hair and eyes. Ever since Sasuke's older brother, Itachi, slaughtered his whole clan, Sasuke had acted very emo-ish. He completely ignored any human interaction from anyone. He dedicated his time to training to avenge his clan. Naruto personally found it pathetic that he would ignore everybody all for some petty revenge that was impossible for him to do. The next two people to enter were Shikamaru Nara and Choji Akamichi. Now at first glance Shikamaru seemed like a lazy. But Naruto quickly learned that he was actually a genius on an incredible level. But he was still a lazy. Choji was a very plump boy that always seemed to have a bag of chips in his hands. He always hung out with Shikamaru and seemed very loyal. While not the smartest, he made up with it with his strength and stamina. The next person to enter the room was Hinata Hyuga. Now Hinata was always a mystery to Naruto. When he first met her all those years ago, she was shy and nervous all the time. But when the 3rd year of academy started, she had completely changed. She was cold and rigid like the rest of her clan. She treated everyone as if they were lower than her. It honestly made Naruto confused. The next person to enter was Kiba Inazunka. Kiba was a member of the Inazunka clan. Along with his dog Akamaru, they were a dangerous team. Kiba was very proud, arrogant and prideful. This caused him to act brash and sometimes, most of the time, very stupid. The next person to enter was Shino Aburame. Shino was a very quiet boy. Most of the class was slightly disgusted the boys, special condition, but Naruto had no problem with the boy. The last two people to enter were Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. Sakura was a petite girl with fair skin. She had pink hair and an abnormal forehead. Ino was also a petite girl with fair skin. But she had blonde hair, blue eyes and a normal forehead. These two girls were the most pathetic in the class. They both were deeply in love with Sasuke Uchiha. This caused them to ignore their training and focus more Sasuke. Also due to Ino's parent biased opinion against him, Ino would go out of her way to try and make Naruto's academy experience as bad as possible. She would constantly try to make fun of him, agitate him and sabotage him. Sakura, being Ino's best friend, joined in and started to annoy him. Luckily for them, Mayanaka had forced patience and self-control into Naruto's head. "I still say you should have them all," Kyuubi said. The rest of the class shuffled into the room. Ino and Sakura immediately charged into the room and sat near Sasuke. They tried their best to garner his attention, but Sasuke remained emotionless. Iruka walked into the room with a broad smile on his face. This was his greatest class that he has ever taught. A lot of them had amazing potential and all they needed was a join to bring that potential out. Iruka walked into the front of the class and cleared his throat, try and catch his students' attention. Unfortunately for him, his students were paying no attention to him. Iruka cleared his throat once more but louder. But still his students ignored him. A tick mark appeared on his forehead. "Shut the hell up, you lazy excuse for ninjas," Iruka yelled. All of the students went quiet at Iruka's voice. Iruka grinned when he noticed he had their undivided attention. "Okay class. We will take roll and then we shall take the exam. I hope that you all prepared well for this," Iruka said. Iruka then began to take roll. He got all the way down to the list and reached Naruto's name. He paused for several seconds before saying his name. "Naruto Uzumaki," Iruka said. Silence greeted Iruka and the class. The class looked to where Naruto usually sat and saw that it was empty. "Has anyone seen Naruto?" Iruka asked with hidden mirth. He knew that if Naruto missed the exam, he couldn't be a ninja at least for another year. Nobody in the class has seen Naruto actually. Iruka's face actually broke into a small grin. "Well, I guess we just have to mow." Iruka had to stop in the middle of an explanation when a face interrupted him. "Here," a voice said. The class plus Iruka all looked towards the voice. They all looked at Naruto's usual seat. The air around the seat started to ripple and distort until it revealed Naruto sitting in the seat. He had his white jacket and white Anbu pants. The whole class looked in shock at Naruto's sudden appearance. That just happened?" Kiba asked. "Nobody has an answer for that." Naruto sat in his chair with a smug smirk on his face. Iruka cursed under his breath. Now he had to allow him to take the test. "Ah yes, Naruto. Thank you for gracing us with your presence," Iruka said. The class giggled at Iruka's sarcasm. Naruto ignored the jab by his teacher and laid his head down. Iruka continued the roll. In the middle of it, the co-teacher Mizuki appeared with an apologetic look on his face. Iruka gave him a joking look of anger before finishing the roll. He then reached into his desk and took out a several test. He slowly walked throughout the room handing out of the test. When he got to Naruto, he gave him a hard look, which Naruto returned. He slowly handed him the test before walking away. Iruka finished passing out the test and stood in front of the class. "You will have a whole hour to complete the test. We will be stopping at 10 o'clock exactly. You may begin," Iruka said. The class all collectively shot their head down and started to take the test. Naruto smirked and then started to take the test. He breezed through the test, already having the answers memorized from earlier. After 10 minutes, Naruto turned his test over and leaned back in his chair. Iruka and Mizuki looked in shock that Naruto finished that early. But then they theorized that he probably just wrote random answers. Naruto had to wait for 50 minutes for his other classmates to finish. The first one to finish after him was Sakura, who finished 30 minutes into the test. Sasuke, Ino and Hinata soon finished after her. Shikamaru, Choji and Kiba were some of the last ones to finish. Once 10 o'clock came around, Iruka immediately stopped the test. He collected each of the tests as Mizuki led the children outside. They arrived at a massive target range. Scattered across the field were targets of different sizes and shapes. Iruka met Mizuki and the students outside in the range. He had a clipboard in his hands and a bucket of shuriken, kunai and senbon. This is the accuracy part of the test. Ninja tools are very important tools of a ninja. They could save your life when you run out of chakra. There are 3 targets in the field. The closest is 1 point, the middle is 5 and the farthest is 10. You have 50 throws. Now Shino, you are first. Iruka said. Shino stepped up the drawn line and started to throw the ninja tools. After a minute of throwing he finished. Shino, that was very impressive. 401. Iruka said. Mizuki went and took all the tools out of the target. This rotation continued until it was Naruto's turn. Naruto stepped up to the drawn line and reached into his jacket. A small puff of smoke floated out of his jacket. Naruto pulled his hand out of his jacket, revealing it to be filled with all type of thrown weapons. Kunai, shuriken and senbon could be seen blurring through the air and implanted themselves into the target. Naruto watched in amazement, as each weapon seemed to be a shot. After several seconds of throwing, Naruto stopped. Iruka looked at the target and saw that it was riddled with weapons. He quickly counted the weapons and smirked. That's only 4. A white blur came flying past Iruka and buried itself between the eyes of the dummy. -9. Iruka finished. Naruto stood with a smirk. The senbon made contact with the dummy. Iruka and Mizuki gasped when they noticed that Naruto had gotten a perfect score. Wow! Great job, Naruto. 500. Iruka said, still in shock. Show off. Kyuubi said. Mizuki was about to go remove the weapons but stopped when he saw them shaking in the targets. The weapons went flying off of the target and towards Naruto. Naruto opened his jacket and the weapons seemed to fly into them. Naruto closed his jacket when the weapons were all in his jacket. Naruto looked back up and noticed that his senbon was still in between the eyes of the target. He increased his chakra slightly and then senbon went flying out of the target. The senbon went straight into Naruto's mouth where Naruto caught it with his teeth. Naruto grinned and then walked back over to his classmates. They all were in shock that the dead last had gotten a perfect and used some strange techniques to retrieve his weapon. Iruka continued the test nonetheless, still in shock that Naruto had gotten a perfect and his weird technique. The closet person to Naruto was Sasuke Uchiha, who only got 425. Sasuke seemed very annoyed at this fact. After all the students finished their test, Iruka led them to a small arena. He waited for Mizuki to arrive before explaining the next part of the test. This will be the taijutsu part of the test. You will be paired with a random student and you two will fight. Mizuki and I will be watching each match to see how you are doing. Remember, the object is to do well and not to win. If you are knocked out of the ring, you are eliminated from the match. Iruka stopped to make sure the students understood. Now, due to the odd amount of students, there will be a match of 3. I will need 3 people to volunteer for the match. Iruka said. Immediately Hinata and Sasuke's hand shot up. After that, nobody else volunteered. Naruto, seeing this, sighed and raised his hand. Iruka saw this and then wrote something down on his clipboard. Okay, so Naruto, Sasuke and Hinata will be in the three-way match. Iruka said. Sasuke and Hinata looked at Naruto with an arrogant look. Naruto calmly walked away and sat against a tree. He pulled his hood up and then disappeared from the class's sight. Shino vs. Choji. Iruka said. Shino and Choji walked into the ring to begin the match. Now seeing that most of the girls were creeped out by Shino and Choji was fat, none of the girls were paying attention. Most of the girls went straight for Sasuke to try to garner his attention. But Hinata was not one of those girls. Ever since she started the academy, she had been disgusted by behavior of her fellow female classmates. They would spend hours fawning over the Uchiha while neglecting their training. This caused them to be weak and stupid. Now Hinata couldn't completely make fun of these girls because she was once one of the girls. But instead of Sasuke, it was Naruto. She would spend hours watching him without him knowing. He was the only thing that was allowing her to continue living. Of course, things weren't that simple. Flashback. Today was the last day of the second year of the academy. They would take a series of tests to test their taijutsu, ninjutsu, weapon skills and knowledge. Hinata had taken the entire test and was fairly confident she did well. Hinata walked out of the academy and was about to start following Naruto. But as soon as she took a step towards him, a hand landed on her shoulder. She looked back and saw that it was her cousin, Neji. Hinata-sama, Hiashi-sama demands your presence immediately. Neji said. Hinata didn't even get a chance to reply before she was shunshined in front of her father's office. Neji roughly pushed towards the door, which Hinata went barreling through. Once she caught her balance, she looked up to see her father staring at her with a harsh look with papers in his eyes. Hinata, do you know why I called you here today? Hiashi asked. Hinata nervously shook her head no. She really had no idea what she was here for. Hiashi stood up and slowly walked around his desk. His every footstep seemed to crackle with the floorboard. Hiashi stood in front of Hinata, staring down on her. Hinata felt like she wanted to cry as she slowly shrunk into her jacket. I had your teachers immediately send me your test results today. You were ranked 6th out of the class. Hiashi said. Hinata paled when she heard this. Her father had promised her that if she got anything lower the second that there would be bad consequences. Hinata, I am greatly disappointed in you. I have tried to train you personally in the hope that you would improve. Unfortunately and obviously you have failed greatly. So I have but to allow the council to take over your training. Hiashi said. Hinata paled ever more, if it was possible. She knew the council's training was leagues harder than her father. But Hinata tried to stutter out. That's enough, Hinata. I don't want to hear you excuses. You are to report to the council. Hiashi said. Hinata nodded as tears started to stream down her face. She slowly got up and walked to the door. She opened it and was about to close the door before Hiashi spoke out. I just want to let you know that I am very disappointed in you. Your mother expected great things in you. I have to say that she was completely wrong. Hiashi said. Hinata slowly closed the door. That was the statement that changed her completely. For the summer vacation, Hinata was placed under the tutelage of the council's training. This basically consisted of her battling high-level Hyuga and attempting to beat them. The council was surprised, however, when Hinata actually defeated several of the Genin-level Hyuga. They also noticed that she had a massive shift of behavior. She had grown cold to everyone, even her little sister. After training for 6 months, Hinata had gone through a huge shift. She was arrogant, prideful and strong. One thing that had also diminished was her obsession with Naruto. The council had pounded into her head that he was scum and was below her. Unfortunately, it got to her and her obsession had almost been destroyed. End of flashback. While Hinata was reminiscing, Iruka had breezed through the rest of the matches. It was now hers, Sasuke and Naruto's turn. Hinata, Sakura and Naruto all walked into the ring and stood in opposite corners. Iruka jumped in the middle of the ring. Are you ready? Iruka asked. Kill them. Tear them limb from limb. Feast upon their blood. Kyuubi said. Naruto had to admit it was a tempting offer but decided to ignore the suggestion. Hinata and Sasuke nodded. Iruka looked to Naruto and saw that he was yawning. Iruka sighed and decided to take that as a yes. Begin. Iruka said while jumping out of the ring. All three fighters stood still as the match started. Hinata and Sasuke had immediately slid into a defensive stance. Naruto stood still with his hands in his pocket. Naruto sighed when he saw that neither one of his opponents were going to move. He should have guessed since both of their styles relied on reaction. I am going to make this nice and quick since I have things to do today. Naruto said. The two other students watched, as Naruto seemed to slowly crouch down on the floor. They let out a small gasp when he disappeared from their sights seconds later. They both looked around nervously in trying to find Naruto. Sasuke keeled over, blood coming out of his mouth. Naruto flashed into sight with his fist buried in Sasuke's stomach. Naruto smirked and his hand shot up to Sasuke's neck. Naruto popped up, slightly shifted his center of gravity and threw Sasuke towards Naruto. Hinata's eyes widened in shock as Sasuke's limp body came flying towards her. She quickly sidestepped the body and watched him crash into the wall. Hinata had to wince as she saw blood start leaking out of his mouth. Hinata turned around to face Naruto but was met with a surprise. Naruto was flying through the air with his foot outstretched. Naruto's foot slammed into Hinata's face and sent her flying into the wall right along with Sasuke. Naruto gently landed on the ground. The whole entire class stood in shock. Naruto hand managed to defeat Hinata and Sasuke in under 10 seconds. Iruka and Mizuki both looked in shock at Naruto. He had managed to defeat two of the top academy students. Mizuki ran over to the downed students to see if they were all right. He noticed that both were unconscious. Sasuke had a broken rib and mild concussion. Hinata had a dislocated jaw and bruising all around her face. I'll take them to the medical center, Mizuki said while slinging the two over his shoulder. Iruka nodded, still in shock. Mizuki disappeared in a slight burst of speed. Iruka finished the rest of the matches but everybody was still in shock at the last match. Sasuke's fangirls tried their best to sneak away from the matches and check up on Sasuke but Iruka would stop them each time. When Sakura and Ino finished their matches, they immediately paired up with each other and marched over towards Naruto. Naruto had his hood on so he was completely ignoring the girls. The girls stood in front of him impatiently tapping their feet. A loud snore erupted from Naruto, showing that he had been asleep the entire time. Naruto Baka, wake the hell up! Sakura yelled while reaching for Naruto's hood. Sakura's hand came within inches of touching Naruto before he shot up and grabbed her by her wrist. Sakura felt a high amount of voltage come surging through her body. Naruto remained holding Sakura's wrist for several seconds before letting go. Sakura fell to the ground, a twitching and slightly smoking mess. Naruto slid his hood off and stretched. He let out another loud yawn before looking down at Sakura. He made an agitated look before looking up at Ino with a bored look on his face. Do you want something, Ino? Naruto said. Ino contemplated just taking Sakura and leaving. Unfortunately, her ego and stupidity caused her to stay. Actually, I do. Why the hell did you do that to Sasuke-kun? You could have him. Ino yelled. I fought him. It was a taijutsu match. It was his fault for getting his beat. If you want to yell at someone, yell at him. Naruto said. Sometimes I wonder who is more sadistic, me or you. Kyuubi said. Ino was about to reply but heard Sakura moaning in pain. Fortunately for Sakura, Ino cared about more about her friend's safety than chewing out the dead last. Ino huffed angrily before dragging Sakura away. Uruka led the rest of the class into the building. Naruto saw that Hinata and Sasuke were both seated. Naruto could see that Sasuke's midsection was wrapped in bandages. He also had several wrappings around his neck. Hinata's whole right side of her face was covered in bandages. They both looked dazed. When their eyes landed on Naruto, anger filled them quickly. Naruto smirked at the two and started to taunt them. He would raise his middle finger at them and flex his biceps. And it was honestly driving Hinata and Sasuke insane. The students filed into their seats as Uruka walked to the front of the classroom. Once the class was settled into the seats, Uruka began explaining the last part of the test. This will be the last and most important part of the test. This is the ninjutsu part. It requires you to do the substitution, Henjin clone techniques. You will go alphabetically and one at a time. First is Shino, Uruka said before leading Shino out of the hallway. For the next 30 minutes, Naruto watched as his fellow students walk in and out of the classroom. Some of them walked in with proud smiles and headbands wrapped around different places on their bodies. Some of them walked into the room with a defeated looks on their face and their head hung low. Finally, after 30 minutes, it was Naruto's turn. He went out into the hallway and immediately entered the adjacent room. He saw Mizuki and Uruka sitting behind his desk. The desk had headbands placed on it. Okay, Naruto. Let's just make this simple. I really don't like you and you really don't like me. Let's not play around. Just do the required jutsus so we can remove each other from our size. Uruka said with an irritated tone in his voice. Naruto grunted before being enveloped in a puff of smoke. When the smoke cleared, the two touches froze in fear at what Naruto hanged into. Naruto had turned into a pure white panther. The panther slowly stalked towards the teachers with a menacing look on its face. Uruka and Mizuki were about to attack it before it went up in a puff of smoke and turned back into Naruto. Naruto, I said no jokes. I should fail you for disobeying my order. Uruka said. But you can't. I did what you asked of me. Naruto said. Uruka growled because he knew this to be true. What was that creature anyway? Mizuki asked curiously. That is none of your business. Naruto said. Mizuki growled at Naruto's vague answer. He then smirked when he came up with an idea. I'm sure that the Hokage would know. Mizuki said with a smirk. Actually, the Hokage does not know of these creatures. Now I would appreciate it if we could continue on with the test and not with my interrogation. Naruto said. Mizuki was about to reply but a hand from Uruka stopped him. Mizuki growled and then settled back into his chair. Uruka waved his hand angrily motioning Naruto to continue with the test. Naruto nodded and with a hand sign and a cloud of smoke, the chair was now in his place. Naruto reappeared back in front of the duo seconds later. Now all Naruto had to do was to do the clone jutsu. The teachers watched, as Naruto seemed to take several deep breaths. Slowly sparks started to dance along Naruto's body. As more time passed, the sparks became more and more numerous. The teachers took cover as the sparks came rocketing towards them. They heard a loud poof and looked back over the table. Naruto stood in his same place. But now he had a clone standing next to him. The teachers could see that the clone was a perfect copy of Naruto. They both sighed at the fact that stood before them. Naruto, you pass. Uruka forced out. Naruto grinned before picking up a headband. He put his in his pocket and started to head for the door. He stopped as his hand reached the handle. You two are pathetic pieces of trash that I would love to at the moment. Fortunately for you, I have so much anger against both of you I doubt I can make it look like an accident. So I will just have to leave with this. The both of you. Naruto said before slamming the door shut. Naruto walked out of room and back into the classroom. All of the students looked at him with expectant eyes. When they saw no sight of a headband, most of them smirked. I knew you were going to fail. Your victory against me was just a mistake, you pitiful dead last. Hinata said arrogantly. Naruto walked up to her and reached into his pocket. Hinata muscles started to coil in trying to prepare to defend an attack from Naruto. Instead, Naruto's hand flew out with a headband enclosed in it. He waved it in front of Hinata's face before sitting in his usual seat. Maybe I should get you some glasses because it's obvious you can't see. And here I thought the Hyuga had all-seeing eyes. You just proved that wrong. Naruto said. You told her. Kyuubi said. Hinata growled once again at being looked at like an idiot. It seemed that Naruto was doing that to her a lot recently. The remaining students took the exam. When everyone was finished, Iruka and Mizuki walked out with proud faces. I am happy to say that 80% of you passed the exams. I am so proud to see the progress all of you made over the years. Iruka said with a wide grin on his face. Mizuki stepped up and started to talk to the class. Now for you who passed, your team will be announced at 9 a.m. next Friday. Mizuki said. Now you are all dismissed for the last time. Enjoy your ninja careers. Iruka yelled out. The passing students all charged out of the door cheering wildly. Naruto disappeared in a shunshin. Naruto reappeared sitting in a booth. He looked across from the booth to see Anko sleeping with her head down. Naruto smirked and then slowly leaned into her ear. Wake up, Anko-chan. Your Naru-kun is here to pleasure you. Naruto said a low and whispery voice. Anko shot up with a massive blush and a slight nosebleed. She looked up and saw Naruto smirking at her. She growled when she realized what Naruto had done. Urine. You woke me up from a really good dream. Anko said with a growl. Did the dream have me in it? Naruto said. Anko leaned closer with a smirk on her face. And what if it did? Anko asked. Naruto slowly leaned even closer to Anko. I think I will have to make your dreams your reality. Naruto said with a seductive tone in his voice. Anko backed away blushing madly. Naruto backed away with a wide smirk on his face. He then dug into his pocket and slammed his headband on the table. Anko looked at the headband in shock. Congratulations, Gaki. You're finally a ninja. Anko yelled while wrapping Naruto in a gigantic hug. Naruto blushed at the feeling of his face against Anko's. After several seconds, Anko let go of the hug and sat Naruto back down into his seat. So do you know who is on your team? Anko asked while eating a piece of dango that mysteriously appeared in her hand. Naruto leaned back into the chair and closed his eyes. I actually don't know for sure. I have to wait till Friday to know. So I am free all this week. Naruto said. What do you plan on doing? I know you don't like to sit around and do nothing. Anko said with her hand on her cheeks. Actually, I planned on spending the week in the Forest of Death. I need to train up more on my survival skills. I doubt I will be able to do so while I am a genin. Naruto said. I think you just want to be close to me. Anko said teasingly. And what about if I did? Naruto said with a smirk. The two stared at each for a while and then busted into a bout of laughing. The two continued to talk for hours and hours, just enjoying each other's company. By the time they were finished, they had managed to eat a combined 36 plates of dango and 37 bowls of ramen. The two said their goodbyes before going their separate ways. Naruto was on his way to his apartment to get his survival supplies. Hiruzen had managed to get him an apartment several weeks after his birthday. It was isolated from the rest of the village. Just as Naruto was about to open his door, he felt a presence behind him. He turned around and saw an Anbu with a cat mask. The Hokage requires your presence. The Anbu said. The Anbu didn't even wait for Naruto to reply before attempting to grab Naruto's shoulder. But the Anbu had to recoil when he felt a high amount of voltage run through his system. He stepped back in pain. Naruto looked at the stunned Anbu with a bored look on his face. I think I can get there myself, Naruto said. Naruto put his hands in a hand sign and concentrated his chakra. A bolt of lightning struck near him seconds later. When the dust cloud, which was caused by the lightning strike, disappeared, Naruto was gone. In the Hokage Tower, Hiruzen was once again battling his immortal enemy, paperwork. He had sent his Anbu to collect Naruto. But he wanted to get as much of this dreaded paperwork over. Hiruzen heard a loud boom that sounded like thunder. He looked out of the window and saw that it was a clear day. A lightning strike crashed through his roof and impacted against the floor. When the lightning strike stopped, it was revealed to contain Naruto. Hey old man, what do you want? Naruto asked. Hiruzen was about to ask about the lightning but decided against it. He knew it would bring up some issues that he would rather not deal with now. Naruto, you may want to sit down for this, Hiruzen said. Naruto shrugged at Hiruzen's weird behavior. Hiruzen took in a deep breath before speaking. Naruto, you contain the Kyuubi. Naruto, you are the container of the Kyuubi, Hiruzen said bluntly. Naruto sat there staring at the man. Hiruzen was waiting for Naruto to reply. Hiruzen tried to discern even a single emotion from Naruto's face but picked up nothing. Hiruzen heard Naruto sigh before looking at him. I already knew that, Naruto said bluntly. Hiruzen looked in shock at the news. He had never expected the boy to already know he contained the Kyuubi. How do you know? Who told you? Hiruzen said hastily. I figured it out by myself. Plus it really wasn't a well-kept secret, Naruto said. Hiruzen sighed and then seemed to sink even further into his chair. So have you made contact with it? Hiruzen asked. Actually I have. It is a very annoying entity. It constantly encourages me to villagers while also threatening to me. Although his threats are hollow as I would never let him escape, Naruto said. You're making look like a Kyuubi growled inside of Naruto's mind. Naruto grinned cheekily at Kyuubi's anger. When Hiruzen heard that Naruto had been talking to Kyuubi, he shot up in his chair. Naruto, when did you start communicating with the Kyuubi? That process wasn't supposed to happen until you at least turned 18. Hiruzen said. While I was in the coma, the lightning strike seemed to accelerate everything about my body, so I am not surprised that it affected the seal, Naruto said while crossing his arms. Hiruzen looked at Naruto but had to avert his eyes from the harsh glare Naruto was giving him. So I am guessing you are mad about me not telling you about the Kyuubi earlier, Hiruzen said. Honestly, I don't really care. The information would not have and did not have any effects on me whatsoever. While I don't appreciate you keeping person secrets about me from myself, this secret holds no value. Now if this all, I will be taking my leave, Naruto said while promptly walking out the office. Hiruzen slumped into his chair when he heard the last part of Naruto's speech. If only you knew, Naruto-kun, if only you knew, Hiruzen said while staring out of the windows of his office at the Hokage monument. With Naruto, you know he is keeping secrets from you. I say we charge back into the old monkey's office and interrogate him, Kyuubi said. Naruto stopped to consider the offer before continuing his mad charge through the village. Shut up, Kyuubi, Naruto yelled out loud. Naruto stopped and looked around. Did he just say that out loud? By the looks the villagers were giving him, he could probably say yes. Naruto huffed and continued walking through the village. After several minutes of mad stomping, he reached his destination. Naruto jumped over the massive gate that surrounded the whole forest of death. Naruto landed crouched on the ground with a pissed-off look on his face. Naruto released a massive roar before bounding into the forest. I love it when you act like this, Kyuubi said. In the forest, a collective shiver ran through the creatures of the forest. Whoever had made that roar was pissed off and looking for blood. 1 week later, Naruto slowly walked through the gates of the forest with a huge grin on his face. Now the grin was disturbing itself, but the fact that Naruto was also covered with an obscene amount of blood seemed to magnify the creepiness. Naruto had spent the last week slaughtering the forest of the creatures and taking out his anger. He had survived purely on the plants of the forest and the meat of the creatures he'd. But now Naruto was calmer, albeit still a little pissed but much calmer. It was the day he was going to be assigned to his Jonin instructor. Naruto contemplated going into class covered in blood but decided not to. He didn't need to give Hiruzen and more reason to think that the Kyuubi possessed him. Who would think that little old me would try to hurt someone? Kyuubi asked with an innocent tone in his voice. Naruto let out a short giggle at Kyuubi's tone. Naruto arrived at his apartment and entered it. He discarded his bloody clothes and jumped into his shower. After a 10-minute shower he desperately needed, Naruto exited the shower with nothing but a towel. He went to grab his new clothes but got a surprise instead. Anko was currently sitting on his couch, watching TV and eating several packs of his ramen. When she heard him, she turned to him and waved at him. "Hey Naruto," Anko said, then turned back to watching TV. Naruto stood there awkwardly as Anko watched TV. After a while he shrugged and picked up his clothes. He activated the seals inside of the jacket and the blood seemed to burn off his clothes. After making sure he had everything, Naruto dropped his towel. Anko had so happened to be looking over at Naruto when he dropped his towel. So she had gotten a full view of Naruto's package. And what a package it was. "The hell, Naruto? Put some clothes on," Anko said with a massive blush on her face. Naruto grinned and then turned to her. If possible, Anko's blush increased. "Well, it is my apartment so I can prance around if I want to. If you don't like it you can leave," Naruto said with a smirk. Anko said nothing and then awkwardly returned to watching TV. Naruto grinned and they continued to get dressed. "So today's the day you get a Jonin sensei. Are you excited?" Anko asked. Naruto pulled up his pants and turned back to Anko. "Not really. I just hope my sensei is not a," Naruto said. Anko giggled at Naruto's blunt answer. Naruto finished getting dressed and sat down on the couch next to Anko. Anko looked confused at Naruto started to watch TV with her. Don't you need to be getting to the academy?" Anko asked. "Nah, I can be a little late," Naruto said. Anko shrugged at Naruto's behavior. For the next 2 hours Anko and Naruto sat on the couch, watching TV and eating ramen. Finally, after the 2 hours were over, Naruto decided it was time to leave. "Well, I think being 2 hours later is enough," Naruto said while suddenly standing up. Anko pouted at the fact that Naruto now had to go. "Ah, Gaki. Why are you leaving your Anko-chan so soon?" Anko said with bottom lip quivering. Naruto grinned and then softly patted Anko's head. "Sorry Anko-chan, but I gotta go meet my sensei," Naruto said. Naruto walked to the door and was about to open it but stopped. He looked back to Anko with a small blush covering his face. Anko looked confused at this. It usually took a lot to make Naruto blush. Naruto walked over to Anko with his hand behind his head. Anko, I was wondering if you would like to go on a date after my meeting today," Naruto said nervously. Anko looked in shock at Naruto's question. When it finally registered in her mind, a big blush spread through her face. A wide smile soon followed the blush. "I would love to go on a date with you," Anko said while smiling brightly. Naruto's nervous smile bursted into a massive grin. He smiled brightly and went for the door again. "I'm guessing you are staying here, so I will see you after my meeting," Naruto said while shutting the door. When Naruto left, Anko slumped into his chair with a happy sigh. Honestly, she had been waiting for Naruto to say that to her for a while, and not that it finally happened. She was ecstatic. Anko continued watching TV all while having a soft smile. With Naruto. Naruto was currently walking through the streets of Konoha with a massive grin on his face. Now seeing a happy Naruto was a very weird sight. So in all, it was a very scary sight for the villagers. Naruto arrived at the academy with his grin still intact. He arrived at his homeroom and then quickly controlled his features. He threw his hood over his head and went inside of his room. Now Naruto really didn't expect anybody to be in the room. He honestly only expected Iruka to be there. But the occupants of the room surprised Naruto. Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno sat in the classroom alone. Sasuke was sitting in one of the corners of the room and Sakura seemed to be pestering him. Sasuke and Sakura turned to the door in hope that their sensei had finally arrived. Instead, the hooded Naruto greeted them. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura locked EY hoods. As soon as Naruto saw Sasuke and Sakura, he turned around and slammed the door shut behind him. Are you ing serious? I have to be paired up with those two. Is this some sort of punishment? I bet Hiruzen mad cause I was talking to the Kyuubi. Naruto said to himself. I bet Kami hates you. Kyuubi said. A man was currently walking through the hall towards Naruto. He currently had his face buried in a book. Due to his perverted giggles and blush that flushed his face, one could clearly see that the book was perverted. He continued walking down the hallway. Due to the amount of anger Naruto was feeling, he was unaware of the quickly approaching figure. The two collided into each other and both of them went on the ground. Watch where you're going, Naruto said angrily. The figure stood up and looked down at Naruto. Naruto looked up and finally got a good look at the man. The man wore Anbu-style pants and shirt. He had a green vest on. The man had spiky silver hair that stood up on its ends. His headband covered on of his hands. The man seemed to smile before reaching out with one of his hands. I'm sorry. I guess this is a bad way to meet your new sensei. My name is Kakashi. I'm guessing you are Naruto, right? Kakashi said. Naruto grabbed Kakashi's hand but immediately had to let go. Kakashi was once again sent to the ground as Naruto's electrical touch shocked him. Naruto's sweat dropped as his sensei twitched on the ground for several seconds before jumping back up perfectly fine. Well, that stung a lot. Now let's go pick up your teammates, Kakashi said while starting to walk back to the classroom. Naruto groaned as he remembered who his teammates were. He reluctantly followed Kakashi back to his classroom. He saw him enter the room for several seconds before exiting. Kakashi looked back at Naruto and smiled. Meet me on the roof, Kakashi said before disappearing in a shunshin. Naruto nodded and slowly crouched on the ground. When he heard Sasuke and Sakura come to the door, he exploded toward the door. A yellow blur seemed to fly through the stairwell. The blur slammed open the access door to the roof and stopped right in front of Kakashi. Kakashi looked in shock as the blur was revealed to be Naruto. Damn, that was fast, Kakashi thought. Naruto leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. Kakashi took this time to examine Naruto. From what he was seeing so far, the academy records were completely wrong. They said Naruto was a brash child that had minimal potential in being a ninja. But yet the kid was able to move near low Jonin speeds while he was an academy student. He also seemed very calm and collective. Kakashi also saw an abnormality in Naruto. He could see sparks actually flying off of Naruto's skin. It seemed like Naruto was creating his own electrical energy and giving it off through his skin. Finally, after several minutes of awkward silence, Sakura and Sasuke arrived. They took their seats next to Naruto, Sasuke to his right and Sakura to his left. Once Kakashi saw that his team was situated, he began to talk. Well, hello everyone. One of you already know me, but the rest don't. I am Kakashi Hatake and I might be your Jonin sensei. Kakashi said. Sakura gained a confused look when she heard might. What do you mean by might? We passed the exams. Sakura yelled out. Kakashi threw another eye smile at the genin. Well, you see, that wasn't really the exam. It was more like a ruse to weed out the weak genin. The test I will be giving you will be a survival test. Kakashi said. The news shocked the three genins. They all thought that this was the end. Only a third of the academy students will actually pass the real genin exam. But I don't think you need to worry about that. Not a single genin team has ever passed my exam. Kakashi said. This sent the genin further into shock. All the work they put in the academy could be washed down the drain if they fail this test. Well, enough talking about the exams. Let's introduce ourselves. You can go first, Pinky. Kakashi said while pointing at Sakura. Sakura huffed at Kakashi's nickname. Why don't you go first, sensei? Just so we can know how we should do it. Sakura asked. Kakashi sighed then nodded. Well, my name is Kakashi Hatake. My likes are a little too graphic for you. My dislikes I have a lot. My hobbies are reading. My dream is, once again, a little too graphic for you. Kakashi said while ending it with an eye smile. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura all sweat dropped at the very vague introduction. Kakashi pointed at Sakura to signal her to go. Well, my name is Sakura Haruno. My likes are. Sakura stopped and looked at Sasuke. She let out a small giggle and had a small blush covering her face. My dislikes are perverts, rapist and Naruto baka. Well, you too. Naruto shot back at her. Sakura glared at Naruto before continuing her introduction. My hobbies are reading and, she stopped once again to stare at Sasuke. My dream is to, she stopped again to stare at Sasuke. She continued to state at Sasuke. Naruto and Kakashi sweat dropped at the girl's behavior. Sasuke looked ahead, unaware of the girl that was next to him. Ook. Well, that was weird. On with you, emo boy. Kakashi said with a eye smile. Sasuke grunted at Kakashi's nickname for him. My name is Sasuke Uchiha. My likes are few and none of your business. My dislikes are numerous and include this whole team. My hobbies are training. And my dream is to a man and restore my clan. Sasuke said with a monotone. Once again Naruto and Kakashi swear dropped at the weird intro. Sakura looked in awe at Sasuke's cool intro. Well, that was interesting. Last and not least is little Speedy here. Kakashi said while looking at Naruto. Naruto looked at Kakashi with a mad look in his eyes. Please don't call me that, Hatake. Naruto said. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are ramen, jaguars and Anko-chan. My dislikes are windy days and spiders. My hobbies are training, eating ramen and hanging out with Anko-chan. My dream is none of any of your business. Naruto said. Kakashi nodded at the intro. That was the most normal one so far. Okay, those introductions so weren't real. Well, you are to meet me at training ground 7 at 5 a.m. exactly. If you are late, that will count as an automatic fail. Bye now, Kakashi said before disappearing in a shunshin. The three students blinked owlishly at their teacher's sudden disappearance. Naruto, guessing that they were dismissed, disappeared in a burst of speed. Only Sasuke and Sakura remained of the roof. Sakura saw that only her and her crush were left on the roof. She decided this was the best time to ask Sasuke out on a date. Sasuke-kun, I was wondering if you would like to go on a date with me. Sakura asked while looking down with a blush on her face. Sakura waited several for Sasuke to reply but heard nothing. She looked up and saw that Sasuke had left without her knowing. She fumed in anger when she realized that her crush had once again escaped from her grasps. I will find you, Sasuke-kun. Sakura yell ranged through the village. Somewhere in the village a chill went down Sasuke's spine. He had a bad feeling something bad was going to happen. With Naruto. Naruto had arrived at his apartment steps. He walked up to it and opened the door. He saw that Anko was still on his couch, but now she was sleeping. Naruto smiled and then slowly walked up to her. He slowly shook her shoulder to wake her up. Don't wake her up. Take her as yours while she sleeps. Kyuubi said. Anko, it's time to wa-oomph. Anko tackled Naruto to the ground. He suddenly found a kunai to his neck. Anko looked at him with drowsy eyes. When he finally got a good look at him, a sheepish look appeared on her face. She slowly got off of him and helped him up. Sorry Naruto-kun. I sort of just let my instincts to take over. Anko said while helping Naruto up. Don't worry about it, Anko-chan. Are you ready for our date? Naruto said with a smile. Anko nodded and Naruto stuck his arm out. Anko looped her arm through Naruto's and the two headed out of the door. They walked onto the streets and were immediately bombarded by a wave of dirty looks. But Naruto and Anko paid no attention to the villagers' looks. After several minutes of walking, they arrived at a restaurant. The restaurant had a giant sign that said, Hidden Leaf. Anko looked at Naruto with surprise clearly shown on her face. The Hidden Leaf. Never expected something so fancy. How did you even get a reservation here? Anko asked. Naruto smirked and let out a short laugh. Don't you worry about that, Anko-chan. Just know that I always have my ways. Naruto said while leading Anko into the restaurant. As soon as the two entered the restaurant and immediately knew they stood out. Everybody in the restaurant was either wearing a kimono or a dress. Naruto and Anko stood out with Naruto's completely white clothes and Anko's trench coat and her fishnet. Naruto walked up to the podium that was in the front of the restaurant. He was greeted by a sneer from the man that ran the podium. What are you doing here, boy? We don't serve your or her kind here. The man said. Naruto grinned and started to walk up to the man. He got within inches of him before stopping. Suddenly Naruto's hand shot out and grabbed the man's head. Naruto then slammed the man's head into the podium. If you would kindly look on that little list there, you would see that there is a reservation listed for Uzumaki. Now I would appreciate it if you would kindly lead us to our table. Naruto said. The man looked at the list as best as he could and saw that Uzumaki was listed there. He sighed in defeat and Naruto let go of his head. The man fixed his uniform before grabbing two menus. If you would kindly follow me. The man said before leading the two through the restaurant. As they were walking through the restaurant, they both received dirty looks. But Naruto would return the look with ones of his own that was harsher. After several seconds of walking, the two arrived at a table that was at the back of the restaurant. The two sat down and the waiter walked away. As soon as they sat down, Anko began to stare intently at Naruto. After a while Naruto looked up from the menu and saw that Anko was staring at him. What? Naruto asked. How in the world did you get a reservation here? The waiting line for this place is days long. Anko asked. Well, I just used my power of persuasion to persuade the owner to let me and my date get a giggle. I gave him an offer he couldn't refuse. Naruto said. Flashback. Naruto was currently standing on the roof of the Hidden Lead. You see, he was planning to ask Anko on a date and surprise her with bringing her here. Naruto had plenty of money to take her here, but he doubted they would let him in. So he decided to have a little talk with the owner. It was late at night and the Hidden Leaf had just closed several minutes ago. The owner was the only one left in the building. He walked out of the building and locked it behind him. He managed to take 2 steps before Naruto dropped onto him. Naruto grabbed his shoulder and electrocuted him. The man fell unconscious. Naruto picked up the man and disappeared in a shunshin. Several hours. The hidden leaf owner groggily started to wake up. He immediately tried to move his arms but found them bound. He looked behind him and saw that he was tied to a tree. He started to panic when he realizes he was tied to a tree in the middle of the night. Help me, help me. The man started to yell loudly. Suddenly the air around the man started to shimmer in front of the man. Naruto appeared in front of the man. When the owner saw who was in front of him, a sneer appeared on his face. I knew it. You are a demon. You captured me to me. The villagers will come for you. You will be the fur. The man was silenced by the back of Naruto's hand against his cheek. Will you just shut the hell up? I am not here to you. Naruto said, agitated. He really wanted to be asleep right now. Then why did you drag me here? The man said, confused. Naruto crouched down and came face to face with the man. All I want is a reservation to your restaurant for Friday. That is it. Naruto said. The man suddenly busted out into a bout of laughter. The laugh was mocking and was clearly getting on Naruto's nerves. The man stopped laughing and looked at Naruto with a, "Are you serious?" look on his face. If you think I will risk my restaurant's reputation just to get you a reservation, then you are wrong. You will never dine in my restaurant, you demon. The owner said with finality in his voice. Naruto gave a short chuckle and then stood up to his full height. Hey, I figured you would say something like that. Naruto said. Naruto held up his hand and balled it up into a fist. Suddenly a massive amount of sparks started to fly off of his hand. Naruto then looked at the man with a bored look on his face. Now we can do this the easy way or the hard way. The easy way requires you to give me the reservations and you walk away unharmed. The hard way requires me to send hundreds of thousands of volts into your body and then you give me the reservation. The choice is yours. Either way I am going to have fun. Naruto said. The man's eyes darted in between Naruto and Naruto's fist. After several seconds of hard thinking, the man let out a sigh of defeat. You can have the reservations. The man said. Naruto grinned and started to untie the man. Once untied, the man stood up with a groan and started to stretch. He looked towards the village and then turned back to Naruto. Hey, could you give me AR? The man was interrupted by Naruto's fist slamming into his cheek. The man fell to the ground unconscious. Naruto looked down onto the unconscious man. Don't you think that was a little harsh? Kyuubi asked in a sarcastic voice. TCH, bastard deserved it. Naruto said before picking up the man and shining away. Naruto appeared in front of the hidden leaf and dropped the man roughly to the ground. He then shined away, leaving unconscious man lying in the middle of the street. Naruto then walked down the street disappearing into the night. End of flashback. Anko busted out in a fit of laughter as Naruto retold his story. The two continued their date for 2 hours before walking out of the restaurant. Naruto walked Anko home. They were now standing on Anko's doorstep. I really appreciate this date, Naruto-kun. Anko said. Naruto gave off a light smile and rubbed the back of his head with his eyes close. Naruto's eyes suddenly flew open as Anko's lips connected with his. Naruto felt Anko deepen the kiss and deepened it himself. The two remained kissing for several minutes for they came up for air. Anko smiled at Naruto before walking into her apartment. Naruto walked through the village the happiest he has ever been. Next day, a loud and annoying alarm clock could be heard ringing throughout the apartment. The apartment continued to ring for several minutes before a kunai zipped towards it and smashed it. The kunai then zipped back under the covers and into the hands of the owner. A groan could be heard from under the covers. The covers were suddenly thrown off to reveal Naruto writhing on the bed. Naruto groggily got up out of the bed and went into the shower. After a 10-minute shower, Naruto stepped out and got dressed. After eating a breakfast of toast and rice, Naruto began his trek through the village. Now it was only 5 a.m., so the streets were relatively deserted. After a 10-minute walk, Naruto arrived at the training ground. The training ground consisted of a large clearing that was surrounded by a very dense forest. The clearing had a medium-sized lake that was kept in the back of it. Naruto walked to one of the thicker trees and climbed up it. He leaned against one of the thicker branches of the tree, threw his hood over his eyes and swiftly went to sleep. Couple hours later. A couple of hours had gone past and several things had happened. Sasuke and Sakura arrived at the same time and began their daily ritual of Sakura pestering him and Sasuke ignoring her. Eventually Kakashi arrived in a flutter of wind and leaves. He got his yelling from Sakura before dropping his book. He gained a confused look as he didn't spot Naruto. And this is where we drop in. Has anyone seen Naruto? Kakashi said. Sakura, Sasuke and Kakashi all got a shock as Naruto suddenly appeared standing next to Sasuke and Sakura. Kakashi's sweat dropped at Naruto's sudden entrance. I'm right here, sensei, Naruto said. Kakashi nodded and then started his introduction. Well, as you know, today is your survival test. The main objective is to get these 2 bells, Kakashi said. Kakashi reached into his weapons pouch and pulled out 2 metal bells. Kakashi then saw Naruto grin out of the corner of his eyes. Kakashi's eyes widened as he felt Naruto's chakra spike very suddenly. Suddenly the bells came flying out of Kakashi's loose grip and into Naruto's hands. Done, Naruto said. Sasuke and Sakura looked at Naruto in shock since he had just technically completed their test. Kakashi's sweat dropped at the fact that Naruto had taken the bells so easily from him. So am I a genin yet? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. No, I didn't say go yet. Yes, that's the reason, Kakashi said while nervously rubbing the back of his head. Naruto sighed and then threw the bells back at Kakashi. Kakashi put the bells back into his pouch. Well, seeing as we are running late, let me just fast forward this. As you can see, there are only 2 bells. That means that 2 of you will pass. The other one will go back to the academy. So that your test starts in 3, 2, 1 go. Kakashi said as he rushed the last part. Sasuke and Sakura immediately dashed into the forest. Kakashi looked at Naruto expectantly as he stood before him. You're not very smart, are you? Kakashi asked while flipping through his book. Kakashi heard Naruto let out a small laugh. Kakashi looked up from his book and saw Naruto throw his hood over his head. Kakashi's eyes widened as Naruto disappeared right before his eyes. Kakashi immediately put his book away and dropped into a defensive stance. He began to look around in an attempt to find the invisible Naruto. Suddenly Kakashi felt a strong punch come across his foot. Kakashi was lifted off his feet and into the air. Kakashi managed to right himself before landing in a crouch. You know, I could just end this right now. A voice rang out from behind Kakashi. Kakashi suddenly twisted around with a kunai in his hand. He hit nothing but air. I expected more from an elite Jonin. The voice ranged out again. Kakashi turned around once again, but this time had his fingers up towards his mouth. A torrent of flames shot out from his lips and flew through the air. Unfortunately for Kakashi, he still didn't hit Naruto. So close yet so far. Naruto's voice ranged out once again. Kakashi growled and then reached into his pouch. His arm came flying out and several kunai and shuriken were sent flying through the air towards the voice. The weapons sailed through the air and flew uselessly into a tree. This is getting boring, Naruto said. Now Sakura and Sasuke were currently seeing a strange sight. Their sensei was seemingly attacking an invisible opponent. They watched as he threw kunai, shurikens and jutsus toward the enemy. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't working. Kakashi had just got finished throwing another waves of weapons towards his invisible students, and honestly he was starting to piss him off. No matter how fast Kakashi reacted, Naruto managed to avoid his attacks. Kakashi sighed in defeat when he realized what he must do. He went through several hand signs and casted a small genjutsu over his face. He then pulled up his headband to reveal that he had a fully matured Sharingan in his eyes. Kakashi looked around in an attempt to find Naruto. He suddenly stopped when he detected Naruto's chakra signature. Gotcha, Kakashi said before taking off towards Naruto. Naruto grinned when he realized that Kakashi finally figured out a way to detect him. He quickly slipped into a defensive stance and waited for Kakashi. Kakashi reached Naruto and threw a heavy punch at Naruto. Naruto ducked under the punch and grabbed onto Kakashi's arm. Kakashi's eyes widened as he felt a gigantic amount of voltage enter his system. Kakashi attempted to get out of the grip, but Naruto was too strong. Naruto watched as Kakashi struggled to escape his electrifying grip. Naruto's eyes widened, however, when the Kakashi he was holding went up in a puff of smoke. 1,000 years of pain. Naruto heard Kakashi yell behind him. Kakashi was as Naruto went flying into the air. He was however disappointed when that Naruto exploded in a display of sparks. Kakashi turned around as he saw what seemed to be a lightning bolt approaching him fast. Kakashi ducked quickly as the lightning bolt went sailing through the air. Kakashi watched as the lightning bolt hit a tree and collapsed it easily. Don't want to be hit by that, Kakashi thought to himself. Kakashi turned around and started to run towards Naruto. Naruto grinned and then reached into his jacket. Kakashi's muscles tightened as he prepared to dodge any projectiles thrown towards him. Kakashi's suspicion was right. Naruto's hand blurred out from his jacket and launched dozens of weapons towards Kakashi. Kakashi grinned and then proceeded to duck and dodge through the wave of weapons. Kakashi reached Naruto and easily pinned him to the ground with a kunai against his neck. Do you forfeit? Kakashi asked. Kakashi watched as Naruto's smile seemed to increase. Kakashi's eyes widened as he felt Naruto's chakra spike once again. Kakashi turned around and saw that all of the weapons Naruto had thrown were now coming back towards him. Kakashi managed to shunshin himself into a nearby tree. Kakashi watched as the weapons slammed against the still Naruto. He sighed in release when he realized that Naruto was only a clone. Kakashi looked around the training ground to find Naruto. He found him standing in the middle of the training ground. Kakashi watched as Naruto threw a kunai into the base of the tree he was occupying. Kakashi heard Naruto say something and felt his chakra spike once again. Kakashi looked in confusion as nothing happened. Kakashi then heard a loud boom and looked up. Kakashi's eyes widened as he saw a bolt of lightning come down from the sky and towards him. Kakashi hopped from the tree and onto the ground as the lightning hit the tree. The tree fell to the ground in a burning and scorched mess. Kakashi looked back towards Naruto with a shocked look into his eyes. A genin should have been able to do those sorts of jutsus. Kakashi looked at Naruto cautiously. He was waiting for Naruto to make a move. Kakashi's muscles tightened as Naruto reached into his jacket. Kakashi's eyes widened as Naruto pulled out the two bells. He looked down in confusion at the two bells he had on his hips. He watched as they both went up in a puff of sparks. Like I said, I could have ended this minutes ago, Naruto said. But how? Kakashi said, honestly confused. Naruto grinned as he saw Sakura and Sasuke come out of the forest. I never gave you the bells back. I used my sleight of hands to switch the real bells with the lightning clones hanged as bells. You just so happened to fall for it, Naruto said. Kakashi face-palmed himself for falling for such a simple trick. He then looked up at Naruto with an eyes smile. So who will you give to other bell to Naruto? Only one of your teammates can go with you. Kakashi said. Naruto turned towards Sasuke and Sakura. Sakura had a very conflicted look on her face. It seemed like she didn't want Sasuke to fail, yet she still wanted to pass. Sasuke had a look that said, "You better give me that damn bell or I will you." Naruto sighed and then threw a bell each towards Sasuke and Sakura. "I choose both," Naruto said. Naruto sat in one of the taller trees of Konoha along a very thick branch. He had his hood up and the only thing that was visible about him was the glint of the kunai he held. A small shadow skirted down below him. The figure ran across the forest floor, dodging fallen branches and overgrown roots. Naruto watched as the figure came to a sudden stop and leaned against a tree. Naruto's hand slowly went up to his ear. "I have the target in my sights," Naruto said. The sound of static reached Naruto's ears. "Has the identity been confirmed?" Kakashi's voice rang out through the small earpiece. Naruto looked down and saw that the target remained in the same place. Naruto sent chakra into his eyes to confirm the figure's identity. He looked away slowly and his hand went back to his ear. "Identity has been confirmed. I repeat, identity has been confirmed. Request to confront the target," Naruto said. Naruto waited several seconds for the message to get through the static. Negative. Sasuke and Sakura will confront the target. Provide support when necessarily, Kakashi said once again. Naruto grunted angrily and turned his headset off. Naruto watched as Sakura and Sasuke shot out of the trees and towards the figure. The figure ducked underneath Sasuke and latched onto Sakura's body. Naruto watched as the figure proceeded to scratch Sakura. Sakura's screams of pain ranged out of the forest. Sasuke shot back to Sakura in an attempt to help Sakura. The figure jumped off of Sakura and slid under Sasuke. It then bonded into the forest. Sasuke growled at the creature's escape and bounded into the forest after it, leaving Sakura lying on the forest ground crying over her wounds. Naruto, after laughing his off, turned his headset back on. "Kakashi-sensei, Sakura is down. Sasuke has proceeded to pursue the target. Request to give support to Sasuke," Naruto said. "Request denied. Sasuke can handle the target. Give assistance to Sakura and bring her to rendezvous point," Kakashi said before signing out. Naruto grunted and then jumped out of his tree. He approached Sakura to find her whimper over her wounds. Naruto sighed and then roughly threw Sakura over his shoulder. She started to scream and protest as Naruto carried her fireman style through the forest. Eventually, after several seconds of running, the two arrived at a large clearing. Kakashi leaned against a tree while casually flipping through the pages of his latest porno books. When he looked up, he saw Naruto roughly drop Sakura into the middle of the clearing and jump up onto a tree. Kakashi shrugged and then went back to reading his book. Several minutes into their waiting Sakura, Naruto and Kakashi looked up as they heard a loud boom and a giant smoke cloud started to rise into the air. They then heard a chorus of screams and meows. Naruto let out a short laugh while Sakura looked on with worry. Kakashi ignored the smoke and continued to read. After 20 minutes of waiting, Sasuke entered the clearing with a smug cat under his arm. Sasuke was covered in scratches, burns and soot. He walked up to Kakashi and shoved the cat into his arms. "Mission complete," Sasuke said with a pained voice. Kakashi gave an eye smile and held the cat in his arm. "Good, now let's head back to the village," Kakashi said. As Team 7 walked back to the forest, Naruto decided to get a closer look at the cat. The cat was Tora, cat of the wife of the daimyo of Fire Country. Somehow this cat would escape a highly secured compound and end up near Konoha. Then the daimyo's wife would request a mission from Konoha to retrieve the cat. Now the cat has been a bane in every genin's life for the past 30 years. Its stealth and speed were off the charts. It would manage to hide for hours before actually getting caught. It has since been assigned a D-rank mission to capture the cat. Naruto continued to stare at the cat. The cat turned and growled at him. The hell are you looking at? A feminine voice ranged out. Naruto looked around in confusion at the sudden voice. He started to look around but saw no one else except for his team and the cat. He turned back towards the cat and pointed a finger at it. Is that you? Naruto said. Naruto's team looked at him in confusion as he let out a low meow. They then shook it off as Naruto just being Naruto. Yes, it's me, you retard. I'm actually surprised you can understand me. Are you a cat? That would explain the whiskers. Tora said. Since you signed the Panther clan and Panther are in the Panthera genus who are related to cats, you can talk to animals which are related to jaguars. Kyuubi said. Whoa Kyuubi. Never thought you were so knowledgeable. Naruto thought. Yeah, I have been sealed for about 200 years, so you start to learn stuff. Now stop looking retarded and respond. Kyuubi said. Naruto looked back up and saw the cat staring at him with a ticked off look on its face. Sorry. No, I am not a cat. It just through some special circumstances that I can talk to felines. So why do you run away from the daimyo's wife so often? Naruto asked. The cat let out a pissed off hiss when it heard the daimyo's wife. Because that bitch likes to torture me. Every single time she hugs me, I swear I can see Kami. She dresses me up in stupid outfits and flaunts me like I am a golden statue. Honestly, I want to that bitch in her sleep, but I doubt the daimyo would like that. Tora said. Naruto nodded in understatement. He would see how hard the daimyo hugged Tora and the remnants of the outfits Tora would rip off when she escaped. They were horrible. Naruto, are you okay? Kakashi suddenly asked. Naruto shot up to his full height and looked at Kakashi with confusion in his eyes. Why do you ask? Naruto said. Well, you have been growling and meowing at Tora for the past 10 minutes. Kakashi said. So, if I want to talk to cats, I will talk to cats. Now stop interrupting my conversations. Naruto said before ducking back down to continue his conversation with Tora. Kakashi blinked owlishly before shrugging his shoulder. He figured that he shouldn't be too concerned. Eventually Team 7 arrived at the Hokage Tower and gave the cat back to the daimyo's wife. Sakura and Sasuke managed to find pleasure in the pain the cat was given due to the tightness of the hug it was currently in. Naruto felt extremely bad for the cat but dare not speak out against the daimyo's wife. After she left, Kakashi turned to his team. Alright team, you are dismissed until tomorrow. Kakashi said. Sakura, Sasuke and Kakashi made their exit. Naruto was about to but was stopped by Hiruzen. Actually Naruto, I need you to stay here. I have some very important information to tell you. Hiruzen said with a sigh. Naruto shrugged and stood in front of the Hokage's desk. Hiruzen signaled him to sit down and Naruto took a seat in one of the many comfortable seats that littered Hiruzen's office. Hiruzen sighed once again before starting his talk. As you know, Anko was promoted to the rank of Jonin the week I was away on a diplomatic trip to Suna. As soon as she was promoted, she was assigned AS-class missions. Now normally the objective of these missions are classified, but due to this special issue, I'm able to tell you. She was to assassinate the Rock Daimyo. Now normally I wouldn't give a new Jonin this mission, but I was unaware of it. Hiruzen said. Well, why is this so important that you need to interrupt my training time? Naruto said, irritated. Hiruzen sighed and then took a necklace out of his pocket. He put it gently on the table. Naruto looked down and saw it was Anko's snake necklace. I'm sorry Naruto-kun. It was a setup. As soon as she entered, she was screwed. Anko's dead Naruto. Hiruzen said. Naruto sat emotionless in the chair. Hiruzen sat worried in his chair. He knew that Anko and Naruto had a very close relationship and this would be heavy on his psyche. Naruto suddenly broke out in a fit of laughter. The laughter wasn't full of mirth or fun but desperation and denial. That's a good one, Oji-san. You almost had me there. Naruto said. Hiruzen sighed and dug into his pocket once again. He pulled out a bloody headband and sat it on the table. I'm sorry, Naruto. Hiruzen said. Why, you can't be serious, Oji-san. Naruto said. I'm afraid I am Naruto. Hiruzen said while lowering his head. Hiruzen waited several seconds for Naruto to reply but heard nothing. Suddenly he heard the explosive slam of his doors and looked up. He saw Naruto charging out of his office with a full lightning cloak activated. Hiruzen's eyes widened when he sensed Naruto moving towards the council room. Hiruzen dashed out of his room with his armor on. The council of Konoha was made of the clan heads of Konoha and the leaders of the civilian businesses. Everyone was assembled but were now waiting for Hiruzen. They felt an extremely large chakra signature moving towards them and tensed. Suddenly Naruto busted through the doors and landed on all fours. You are all going to die. Naruto said in a low whisper that still managed to reach through the whole room. The council looked on with confusion. What are you talking ab? The man wasn't able to finish because he found Naruto's scimitar through his throat. The rest of the council looked in shock as Naruto decapitated one of the council members. Naruto picked up the head and threw it into a wall. Anbu, contain him, one of the civilians shouted. Several Anbu surrounded Naruto with their various weapons drawn. Naruto growled and launched himself at the closest Anbu. The Anbu prepared his sword for a strike but was surprised as it started to shake violently in his hands. He watched as his sword flew out of his hands and into Naruto's. Naruto appeared in front of the Anbu and impaled him with his own sword. The rest of the Anbu looked in shock that their teammate had been so easily but quickly got over it. Several Anbu started to go through hand signs and sent several fireballs towards Naruto. Naruto zipped between the fireballs, ducking and weaving to avoid the deadly projectiles. Naruto appeared in front of an Anbu. Naruto threw a punch at the Anbu. The Anbu maneuvered around Naruto's punch and attempted to put him in the grab. But instead he had several 100,000 volts of electricity pushed into his body. He fell to the ground dead. His lightning cloak is powerful. Cover yourself in a thin cloak of wind chakra. The Anbu captain said. Naruto growled and launched himself back at the remaining Anbu. While in midair he went through several hand signs. Lightning release. Zap cannon. Naruto yelled. A giant ball of electricity came flying out of Naruto's mouth. The ball landed in the middle of the group and exploded in a bright flash of sparks. 3 of the Anbu managed to jump away with no injuries but the last 2 had the excess electricity enter their bodies. They were slightly paralyzed and rendered useless. Naruto reached into his jacket and started launch hundreds of kunai, shuriken and senbon at the 3 remaining ninja. The ninja had trouble approaching Naruto as they literally had to dodge a wall of weapons. After what seemed like thousands of weapons, Naruto stopped. He started to go through hand signs again but the Anbu tried to stop him. Lightning release. Chain lightning. Naruto yelled. Naruto held his hand up and a bolt of lightning hit the closest kunai and watched as the bolt of lightning jumped to the kunai. The Anbu had to dodge as several bolts of lightning would randomly jump to any weapon that was near them. After several minutes the lightning stopped, leaving some slightly scorched Anbu. They looked up to confront Naruto but saw that he had disappeared. They stood silently hoping that Naruto was not near them. Suddenly a sword came flying out of one of the Anbu's chest. The remaining 2 Anbu turned around and saw Naruto standing behind the Anbu with his sword through his chest. Naruto withdrew his sword and kicked the dead ninja toward the 2 remaining Anbu. He jumped into the air and once again started to go through more hand signs. Lightning release. Running beast. Naruto said. Naruto landed on the ground and slammed his hands onto the ground. Two panthers made out of lightning chakra appeared out of the ground. They charged at the two Anbu with a roar. The two beasts impacted the Anbu and exploded into a massive amount of sparks. The Anbu fell to the ground, twitching. Naruto turned to the council with his sword drawn. "I'm going to every single one of you," Naruto said. Naruto crouched to the ground and prepared to confront the council. Suddenly Naruto felt a strong pressure on his neck. He fell to the ground unconsciousness. Hiruzen stood over Naruto with a sigh. He looked towards the ninja council and saw that they were actually impressed at Naruto's display. The civilian council, however, were cowering in fear. "What the hell was that, Hiruzen?" One of the civilian council members said. "I told him about Anko. Those two had a very close relationship, so he snapped when he heard that you assigned her to the mission." Hiruzen said. "That does not excuse him from trying to us." Another person on the civilian council yelled. "Although I'm impressed with the boy's fighting skill, I have to agree with my counterparts. This boy tried to assassinate us and shall be punished accordingly." Hyuga Hiyashi, leader of the Hyuga clan, said. A wave of agreement swept through the council. "I say we execute the boy," one of the council member yelled. Arguments exploded in the council room, decided whether to execute the boy. Silence. "You all know we cannot assassinate the boy. The Kyuubi would escape immediately," Hiruzen said. "I propose you hand the boy over to me for emotional training. He will learn how to control himself in instances like this." Danzo said. "No, I refuse to give the boy to you," Hiruzen yelled. "Then what punishment will the boy receive, Hiruzen? We cannot allow this boy just to walk free. He must receive a punishment," Homura said. Hiruzen sighed as he realized the reality of his former teammates' words. He could not allow Naruto to go unpunished for this crime. It would seem biased and would only end him and Naruto in trouble. Hiruzen released another sigh as he slowly started to rub his temples. "I propose that Naruto will be suspended from our ninja activities for an undetermined amount of time while he takes a psyche exam. During this exam he will have all of his chakra sealed off. If he fails, then he is to be put off of ninja duty until he has shown improvement." "Are all in agreement?" Hiruzen said with a heavy tone. Whispers broke through the council room as the different branches of advisors conversed with each other. After several minutes of talking, it seems like they had made their decision. Danzo stood up and faced the Hokage. "We of the council have agreed on the terms," Danzo started. Hiruzen smiled at this. "But only if that he fails the psyche exam that you hand him over to me for emotional training," Danzo said. Whispers broke out the room as Danzo's demand sunk into the mind of everyone in the room. Hiruzen suddenly shot up from his seat and slammed his hands upon his desk. "Silence!" he yelled loudly. Immediately a dense silence permeated the room. Hiruzen slowly began to look around the room while looking in each of the occupants' eyes. "I for one am getting tired of your stubbornness, Danzo. I've already denied your request and I will deny it again. Naruto will be examined by a certified Yamanaka psychiatrist and we will decide for there. And that is final," Hiruzen said with a harsh voice. Unlike last time, no whispers came from the lips of the council. Most were scared to speak, fearful that if they did they would have to fear Hiruzen's wrath. Once Hiruzen saw that no one had any objections, he sat back down with a heavy sigh. "You are all dismissed," Hiruzen said while waving his hand at them. After several seconds of hesitation, the council members slowly started to file out the room. After several minutes, all that was left was Hiruzen, his hidden Anbu, and the unconscious Naruto. "Tora, put a basic chakra blocking seal on Naruto until I can get Jiraiya here. Also take him the NRP. Ninja Rehabilitation Program," Hiruzen said. A ninja wearing Anbu-style clothes and a Tora mask. The figure made several hand signs before lightly tapping its finger against Naruto's forehead. The Anbu then slung Naruto over its shoulder before disappearing with a shunshin. Hiruzen sighed once again before putting his head into his hands. Naruto's POV. All I could see was darkness. Darkness encompassed my business as I was completely swallowed by it. My head was filled with two words. Anko's dead. Those words bounced painfully against my skull until I gained a headache. But the headache was the least of my pain. The pain I was feeling in my chest hurt worst. The pain of losing a loved one stung worse than any headache I have ever had. Worse than any stab wound, any of my breaking bones or destroyed organs. My mind subconsciously registered that the darkness that was surrounding me was lightening up. I was slightly aware that I was now sitting in what seemed to be a puddle of water. I briefly opened my eyes and realized I was inside of my mindscape. The pipes of the sewer were now back, but they seemed to be in a terrible condition. The water level seemed to have risen several inches. I could briefly hear the Kyuubi tried to speak to me, but the words didn't register in my mind. I didn't feel like hearing his wise cracks or stupid comments about me being pathetic. I didn't feeling like dealing with his shit. I felt Kyuubi wrap one of its tail around me in a comforting way. I flinched at first before eventually succumbing to the warmth it was emitting. While it was no substitute for the pain I was feeling, it helped dull it slightly. As I lay wrapped in the tail of the great Kyuubi, I slowly drifted to sleep. Third POV. Kyuubi looked down at Naruto as the boy slept in his tail. Now usually Kyuubi would never be caught doing something like this, but he knew the pain the boy was going through. The pain of losing a loved one was great. Kyuubi was left depressed for several weeks after the sage finally passed away. Kyuubi laid his head down against his paws as he gave Naruto one last final glance. He then fell asleep too, unaware of the light blue eyes that were staring upon the very strange sight. Yukumo shot up from her chair as she cancelled her mind transfer jutsu. Hiruzen saw that she was finished her jutsu and sat up with apt attention. The trio were currently in Hiruzen's office, which had a bed located in it which Naruto was currently occupying. Yukumo Yamanaka wrote several long notes down upon her clipboard before addressing Hiruzen. Hokage-sama, after reviewing Uzumaki's son memories and emotions, I have concluded that he is mentally fit. Although he shows signs of high-level depression at the news of Anko-san's death, his psyche still remains intact. If anything, I would recommend him a therapist and a little time off of ninja duty. Yukumo said. Hiruzen sighed in relief at the news. He quickly dismissed Yukumo before walking over to Naruto. What am I going to do with you, Naruto? Sometimes Naruto really hated his life. It has been a week since Naruto returned to his team from his little vacation. His welcome was indifference from Sasuke and Sakura. Kakashi welcomed him back with an eye smile. But that wasn't what bothered Naruto. What bothered him was his newfound paranoia. Naruto had to constantly fear of being kidnapped once again. He had managed to booby-trap his house to the point where it was almost impossible to enter unless you were Naruto. If it wasn't enough to deal with the paranoia of being kidnapped, the D-rank missions Naruto was forced to go on were pure torture. Even though they were a quick way to get money, they were useless. D-rank missions really showed the laziness that inhabited the civilians of Konoha. Most couldn't even paint their own fence or get their groceries. It was very demeaning to a ninja to be doing mere chores. Speaking of D-rank missions, Team 7 was currently in the Hokage's office trying to get one. The third Hokage was currently shuffling through his files. Let's see, you can paint Shimino-chan's fence. Or you could walk the Inazunka's dogs, or you ko. Hiruzen went quiet when the files he was currently holding transformed into a pile of ashes due to Naruto's lightning bolt. I refuse to do any more of these useless chores. Naruto grunted out. Kakashi's sweat dropped at Naruto's outburst while Sakura and Sasuke nodded their heads in agreement. They both were tired of the missions also and wanted to get something more excited. Hiruzen looked down at the pile of ashes that decorated his desk and looked up at Naruto. His eye was currently twitching in aggravation. He then took a heavy breath and looked at Naruto with a sickeningly sweet smile on his face. Since you are so eager to advance in your ninja career, I will give you a mission that is mandatory for all genin to complete. Kakashi, I am assigning you and your team to a raid. Hiruzen said. Kakashi dropped his books when he heard Hiruzen said raid. His eyes showed a massive amount of shock. Hokage-sama, with all due respect, don't you think they are too early in their career to go on a raid? Kakashi asked. This mission is mandatory for all ninjas, so why not get it out of the way? Now there will be no objections. Here are your mission information. You have a week to complete the assignment. Hiruzen said while throwing a scroll at Kakashi. Kakashi caught the scroll with a sigh. Sakura looked at him with confusion in her eyes. Kakashi-sensei, what is a raid? Sakura asked. I'll tell you later. Meet me at the village gates in an hour. Be prepared for a week-long mission. Make sure to bring weapons. Kakashi said before disappearing in a shunshin. Team 7 dashed out of the room, wanting to get prepared for their first C-rank mission. Naruto stood in his room taking account of his weapons. 3,000 kunai, Senbon and kunai, 50 explosive tags, 10 chakra pills. Sharpening stone. 50 yards of chakra string. Naruto continued to list off his supplies. Hey dumbass, are you going to war or something? Kyuubi said. Naruto growled at the nickname. There is no such thing as being too prepared. Naruto thought back. Naruto sealed his supplies into a ceiling tattoo. He then of the door, after activating his security. He started to walk through the village. Naruto watched as the civilians carried on with their lives with unaware of the danger that stood outside of the walls of Konoha. Ignorant and pathetic villagers. Naruto thought with a sneer. Hey, don't forget you were once like them. An ignorant and innocent child unaware of the dangers that always surrounded you. Kyuubi said. Yea, but I was 5. These people are grown adults. Naruto thought back. After having his little conversation with Kyuubi, Naruto arrived at the gate. The only person that was present was Kakashi, which surprised Naruto immensely. Naruto walked up to Kakashi and sat down next to him. Hello Kakashi-sensei. Naruto said politely. Hello Naruto-kun. Where is your equipment? Kakashi asked. Naruto lifted his arm and showed the ceiling idea that ran down his arm. Although confused about where Naruto got the tattoo, Kakashi understood its use. The two then descended into a comfortable bout of silence as Kakashi read his book and Naruto closed his eyes to get some rest. After several minutes of comfortable silence, Sasuke and Sakura arrived. They both had book bags that seemed to be filled to the brim with items. Sakura looked extremely nervous while Sasuke had an aura of confidence. Once Kakashi saw his team was here, he put down his book. Okay team, we will be going on a raid. There is a bandit group that has been bothering one of the villagers that lay near the border of Fire Country. Our mission is to eliminate them. And by eliminate I mean. Kakashi said with a serious tone in his voice. Sakura and Sasuke looked on with shock. Naruto remained stoic on the outside but was actually pretty surprised. Kakashi smiled at his students. But do not worry. Your amazing sensei will be with you along the way to help you through the process. Kakashi said in an attempt to calm his genin. It partially worked as Sakura and Sasuke seemed to calm down. Now follow me. We should be there by tomorrow night. We will rest when the sun goes down. Move out. Kakashi said while bounding into the forest of Konoha. Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto dashed into the forest after him, preparing themselves mentally for the challenge that awaited them. Team 7 landed in front of a pair of gates. These gates belong to the village of Kishimoto, often nicknamed Hai no Tani or Fire Valley. It was called this because it was located on the edge of a gigantic valley. Kakashi turned to his team with a serious look in his eye. Now we will split up for scouting and gathering information on the bandits. Sasuke and Sakura, I want you two to stay around the market district and I will look for information in the residential area. Naruto, I want you to stay in the slums. With your experience there, you will be able to connect with people easier. Kakashi said. Team 7 nodded as they understood their orders. We are to meet in front of Town Hall in 4 hours. If you get into any type of trouble, spike your chakra and I will be there immediately. Now go, Kakashi said. Sakura, Sasuke and Naruto dashed into the city. Naruto immediately knew when he hit the slums of the village. The difference between the regular village and the slums were night and day. The streets were crowded with peddlers, beggars and thieves. Smoke pillowed from the chimneys that littered the buildings, seemingly building a dark cloud that seemed to mirror the mood of the village. All in all, it was home for Naruto. Naruto walked through the streets trying to stay inconspicuous as possible. He would run through alleyways, duck through shops and hide in people's shadows. This allowed him to gather information stealthy. Did you hear what they did to Shizuki's daughter? Yeah. I heard they took her as payment. What a shame. I heard they took her directly to their base inside of the forest. Well then I doubt she is alive or wants to be alive right now. Naruto stored the memory in the back of his mind and entered one of the bigger and shiftier bars of the village. The bar was filled with dirty-looking individuals, burly men drinking massive amount of alcohol and prostitutes trying to find business. Naruto sat down in the booth chair that was located in the corner of the bar. The bartender slid down to him with a curious look in his eyes. Aren't you a little too young to be drinking in a bar, boy? The bartender asked in a gruff voice. Naruto looked at him with a hostile look in his eyes. Aren't you a little too broke to be passing up business? Naruto asked. The bartender looked at the boy for several seconds before shrugging in defeat. So what do you want? The bartender said. Just bring me a glass of water since you're so worried about my health. Naruto said in a mocking voice. The bartender let out a laugh before pouring Naruto a glass of water. He sat it down on the counter and leaned on it while looking at Naruto. So why are you here, boy? You don't look like a native. The bartender asked. Naruto took a long sip on his water before replying. I was looking on some information about a certain bandit group that has been terrorizing the village. Naruto said. The bartender's eyebrows rose as he heard the information. He grabbed Naruto's empty cup and filled it back up. He then placed it back in front of Naruto. Naruto took a long sip before his eyes shortly widened. The water is poisoned. Naruto said. No shit, Sherlock. Kyuubi said. Naruto sat the glass back down on the table and looked at the man. I think I may know. Why don't you come to the back so we can talk privately? The bartender said. Naruto nodded and walked behind the bar. The man led him into a room and closed the door behind him. Suddenly 5 men jumped out of the shadows that populated the room. Naruto could obviously tell these men were untrained bandits. I was expected a girl this time, Kime. One of the bandits spoke out. The bartender walked in and looked at Naruto with a sickening look in his eyes. Shut up, Kimaru. You can use him for labor. The now named Kime said. The bandits suddenly looked at Naruto as they heard him snicker. Sometimes I have to thank Kami for idiots like you. The patrons of the bar suddenly heard an array of screams rang from behind the door Naruto had just gone through. Of course they shrugged this off as it was a natural occurrence for them. It made even more sense since bartender had dragged the boy back into the back room. They were all, however, shocked when they saw the boy who they thought was doing the screaming, casually walk out of the bar while holding Kimaru over his shoulder. They were shocked even further as Naruto walked out the front entrance of the bar whistling a jaunty tone with a huge smile on his face. Eventually the patrons got over the shock and returned to their drinks. After all, weird shit happened in this city all the time. Sakura was very annoyed right now. First of all, she was miles away from her home village, completely separated from regular human civilization. Second, her sensei had put her with Sasuke-kun, but then he decided to split up. Now she was stuck in a village she didn't know, trying to gather information about a group of bandits she would have to. Killing the bandits had been at the front of her mind for a while. It would be the first time she would have to anyone. Images would flash through her head as her mind tried to comprehend how the experience would be. It had caused her to daydream and have nightmares at night. It wasn't a very good experience for her. Sakura had been searching for information for several hours. She would periodically ask civilians blatantly if they knew any information about the bandit group. She was met with frightened features and silence. After a while, she gave up and decided to see if the rest of her team was in front of town hall. She trudged through the town with a depressed expression etched onto her face. After several minutes of walking, she finally arrived at the front of town hall. She saw Sasuke and Kakashi. Her expression immediately brightened when she saw Sasuke. She ran over and enthusiastically greeted them. "Hey Sasuke-kun, Kakashi-sensei." Sakura yelled. Kakashi gave a curt nod while Sasuke grunted. Sakura stopped in front of them and looked at them in confusion. "Oh, where's Naruto?" Sakura asked. Kakashi was about to reply, but something caught his attention. He heard murmuring coming towards his direction. He turned and his face took on the expression of shock. Naruto was walking straight towards them with a heavy-set man thrown over his shoulder. Sakura and Sasuke turned around and saw their teammate carrying a man over his shoulder. Naruto walked up to his team and looked at them with an innocent smile on his face. "Hey guys, I got us a very potent source of information," Naruto said excitingly. Kakashi, Sakura and Sasuke sweat dropped at Naruto's nonchalant "less." "Well, it is getting a little late. I guess we can rent a hotel room and I can give you an impromptu interrogation class," Kakashi said. Sakura and Sasuke slowly nodded while Naruto wholeheartedly agreed. Kakashi led them through the market district. During the walk, Sakura and Sasuke would sneak glances at Naruto's happy figure. To the both of them, their teammate was an enigma. He sometimes acted carefree and innocent. Yet sometimes they saw a part of him that was downright evil. It was like in a flash of lightning he would change. He would become explosive. It was weird. To Sakura, this scared her. She felt unsafe around her teammate. She always knew in the back of her mind that Naruto wasn't as he always seemed. He wasn't the carefree and innocent boy that could make even the most seasoned veteran let his guard down. No, he was a wolf in sheep clothes. He could hurt her in a second and she knew that. To Sasuke, Naruto confused him and angered him. Like Sakura, he noticed that he had two sides to him. Sasuke knew that if push came to shove, Naruto would shove his sword into his chest without a single second of thought or remorse. Sasuke knew that Naruto was stronger than him. This would hammered into his head by the massive amount of spars that Naruto would literally decimate Sasuke. This scared and angered him. He never wanted anyone to have the power of death over him. Never again. Not after Itachi. Team 7 finally arrived at a hotel. While it wasn't very classy, it was comfortable and homey. Kakashi paid for through room and led his team to a room. He tied to still unconsciousness man to a chair. He then turned to his team. "Okay, let's start with our lesson. When your target is unconsciousness, it is wise to awaken him as painfully as possible. I would recommend an electrical shock. It is painful and is guaranteed to awaken someone. Kakashi said. Kakashi went through several hand signs and then clasped his hands together. For several seconds, he seemed to be in a deep state of concentration. He then slowly started to move his hands. An electrical current seemed to be jumping in between his palms. He slowly moved his arm and placed it on the man's shoulder. Team 7 watched as the man literally jumped out of his seat. His eyes snapped open and he screamed in pain. He slammed down into his chair and looked around frantically. His eyes locked with Naruto and a snarl came to his mouth. You pathetic little brat. I will ing you the moment I get out of this chair. I will slaughter you and your whole family UPMPH. The man was silenced by Kakashi slamming a ceiling tag over his mouth. Most of the times when your target comes out of his unconsciousness state, he will be pissed off. This is when you slap a ceiling over his map. This shuts him up and all you have to do is wait for him to calm down. Kakashi said while turning around. Kakashi's sweat dropped as he observed his team. Sakura and Sasuke seemed to be slowly nodding while following his words. But Naruto had a large pair of glasses on and was currently taking a huge amount of notes on his notepad. Where he got it from, Kakashi did not know. After several minutes of wild, muffled screams from their captured prey, the man relaxed. While he was still shooting extremely dirty glares at Naruto, he had stopped screaming obscenities towards him. When Kakashi saw this, he quickly ripped off the ceiling tag. Now we start the questioning. Kakashi said. Kakashi turned to the man with a hard look on his face. The man returned that look tenfold. Who are you? Kakashi shot off. You. The man answered back. Kakashi narrowed his eyes. His hand shot up and implanted itself on the man's shoulder. The man started to scream in pain as thousands of volts of electricity shot through his system. Kakashi kept his hand on the man's shoulder for several seconds before letting go. The man was left panting hoarsely in pain. Kakashi gave the man an eye smile. Now I am going to ask you again. Who are you? Kakashi said. The man remained silent for several seconds while staring at Kakashi. Kakashi sighed and then raised his hand. Electricity arced around his fingers, doing an intricate dance of power that seemed to be able to intimidate the toughest of foes. The display of power managed to scare an answer out of the reluctant man. Kimaru Kishimino. Kimaru said. Kakashi smiled at the answer. Good, it looks like we're getting some progress. For the next hour, Kakashi would repeatedly ask Kimaru about the bandit camp. Their locations, numbers, strengths, weaknesses and leader. The bandit camp was somewhere near 200 strong. They were led by a low-class nuke nin Furmizu. They had very little training but were armed to the teeth. Once Kakashi finished interrogating the guy, he knocked him out. He then turned to his team with a serious look on his face. Now that we have interrogating our target, we put the information to use. Due to their numbers, I think a stealth attack will work best. We will attack them using the cover of night. Now since we still have quite the amount of time before nightfall, we can use this time to finally get something to eat. Now would you like Sensei to treat you to dinner? Kakashi asked sweetly. Sasuke grunted, which Kakashi took as a yes. Sakura, seeing that her crush had agreed to the dinner, wholeheartedly agreed with him. Naruto though politely declined. I am sorry Kakashi-sensei, but I am not feeling very hungry. Naruto said. Complete bullshit. Kyuubi said. Kakashi waved off the excuse. Don't worry Naruto. Just be back here by 8. We will need some time to prepare. Kakashi said. Naruto nodded and walked out of the door. He then slowly started his trek through the village. All through the village, he could see the effects that the bandits had on the village. The market was filled with inflation. Products that were normally cheap and affordable for most were now almost 5 times as high. Beggars littered every street corners. Whores and prostitutes stood on the streets, trying to earn a quick buck by selling their bodies. Children ran through the streets, secretly pilfering money from the unaware merchants. It was a very sad sight to Naruto. It always amazes me how one person's greed can equal to another's grief. Naruto thought to himself. Naruto suddenly stopped when he felt something tug on his jacket. He looked down and saw a young girl tugging on his jacket. She had brunette hair and looked to be around 10. Her hair was matted with dirt and she basically had rags for clothes. The rags barely covered her private parts. All in all, it was not a pretty sight. "Can you spare any money or food?" the girl said in a soft voice. Naruto's eyes lightened as he knelt down to the girl. He took a quick inspection of her and saw she was greatly malnourished. It looked as if she hadn't eaten in days. Naruto looked at her with soft eyes. "Where's you parents? Shouldn't they have food?" Naruto asked. Naruto immediately knew this was the wrong question to ask. Tears immediately started to pool in her eyes. The tears slowly started to trail down her cheeks. Naruto's hand slowly came up and wiped away the stray tears. The girl smiled at the gesture before finally speaking up. "My dad abandoned me and my mother was Keiki." The girl suddenly started to break down as the memories of her mother's death came crashing down onto her. She collapsed to her knees as the painful memories bombarded her psyche. Naruto, seeing the young child was troubled, wrapped her in a warm embrace. Naruto felt the girl tense but relax after several seconds. The girl continued to cry and hiccup for several seconds while Naruto still embraced, which made a very strange scene for the pedestrians that passed by. Eventually the girl recovered from her momentary breakdown. Naruto, seeing that the young girl was deeply troubled, decided to help her out. "Why don't we get you something to eat?" Naruto paused as he realized he never got the girl's name. The young girl saw that and decided to help Naruto out. "My name is Amai. The newly named Amai." Naruto grinned at the name and started to lead the girl to one of the closer food stands. Naruto entered the stand and immediately knew that it was a ramen stand. His eyes brightened and he dashed to a seat with Amai in tow. He slammed down in a seat with Amai doing the same. She looked dazed at the sudden increase of speed. "5 miso ramens for me and 1 for my friend," Naruto shouted joyfully. Naruto, after ordering the ramen, looked at Amai to see how she was doing. He could see her shyly trying to avoid eye contact with anyone in the stand and make herself unnoticeable. "Don't worry, Amai-chan, I'll make sure nobody will hurt you," Naruto boasted loudly. Amai blushed lightly at the Chan but smiled brightly when she heard Naruto's declaration. She nodded and visibly became less tense. Naruto grinned at this and decided to try and start a conversation. "So Amai-chan, tell me about yourself. What do you like and dislike? Do you have any hobbies?" Naruto asked curiously. Well, my name is Amai, obviously. I'm 11 years old. I like rain, flowers and snow. I dislike hot weather, bandits and perverts. My hobbies are collecting flowers. What about you, Naruto-san? Amai started off shyly but slowly got more confident as her speech went on. Well, my name is Naruto Uzumaki. I'm 13 years old. I like lightning, thunder and ramen. I dislike deserts, hot weather and rapist. My hobbies are sitting out in thunderstorms and training, Naruto said cheerfully. Amai looked confused at Naruto's almost obsessive behavior towards lightning but had no time to question as their food was put in front of him. Yay, finally, Naruto said while suddenly taking out a pair of chopsticks. Where he got them from, Amai didn't know. Amai then watched in amazement as Naruto seemed to destroy his 5 bowls of ramen. Her shock continued to grow as she heard him order another 5 bowls. Naruto looked over to Amai only to see her ramen untouched and her looking at him with shock written in all caps all along her face. What's wrong, Amai-chan? You don't like ramen? We can go somewhere else if you want. Amai could hear the disappointment in Naruto's voice and it hurt her. She started to frantically wave her arms in front of her. No, it's not that, Naruto-san. It just I have never seen anyone eat ramen like you. Amai said. Naruto gave an embarrassed smile before apology. He then gestured to the untouched ramen that remained in front of Amai. Amai looked at it with a questionable look. She had never had ramen before, so this would be a new experience for her. She slowly broke apart her chopsticks and dipped them into the broth. She swirled the noodles around her chopsticks and brought them up to her mouth. Her mouth enclosed around the stick surrounded by noodles. Amai closed her eyes as the flavor of the noodles bombarded her taste buds. She let a moan of satisfaction as she found that she actually enjoyed the meal. She quickly dipped the chopsticks back into the ramen and swirled some more onto her chopsticks. Seeing that he had successfully converted someone to the goodness of ramen, Naruto sat back in his chair with a content smile. For the next 2 hours, the two sat in the ramen stand, sharing conversations about random occurrence and just enjoying themselves. Eventually, though, Naruto had to leave because of his mission. Do you have to leave, Naruto-kun? Amai had gotten comfortable enough around Naruto to be able to use the kun honorific. Of course, the process was sped along by Naruto constantly pestering her to do so and the occasional tap on the head. But eventually she got there. But now the two must separate. Unfortunately, Amai-chan, I must. I promise I'll see you tomorrow. Naruto said. Amai frowned but nodded nonetheless. Naruto gave her a quick hug before dashing out of the stands, leaving Amai alone. Or not. What Amai didn't know was that Naruto was currently standing at the back of the stand and going through hand signs. He slammed his hand on the ground and a clone of himself seemed the form for lightning. The clone was an exact replica of Naruto. Naruto looked at the clone with a harsh glare. You are to trail Amai and make sure nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, happens to her. Make sure to stay well hidden. Naruto said in a strict tone. The clone gulped in fear and nodded to its master. Naruto, satisfied with the response, disappear a bolt of lightning. Kakashi, Sakura and Sasuke were currently sitting in their hotel room, waiting for the arrival of Naruto. Kakashi was off in a corner of the room reading his book. He would occasionally let out small perverted giggles that infuriated and disgusted her. Sasuke was going over his equipment for the upcoming raid. Sakura had started to do the same but got caught up, watching Sasuke. Naruto suddenly appeared in his room with the roar of thunder. Kakashi book flew into the air as he jumped into a defensive stance. Sakura shrieked in fear and hid behind Sasuke. Sasuke also jumped in fear but soon recovered. All of them relaxed, however, when they saw it was Naruto. What the hell, Naruto baka? You scared us, Sakura said. Naruto shrugged and then sat on his bed. He looked at Kakashi expectantly. So are you guys ready? Naruto asked. Kakashi gestured to Sasuke's weapons, asking the question of where was his. Naruto grinned and unzipped his jacket. What Team 7 saw was the closest thing to a walking armory. Hundreds of Senbon, kunai and shuriken seemed to line to his jacket. Kakashi was further surprised when he noticed that Naruto's jacket had several seals that probably contained several more hundred weapons. After seeing Kakashi's approving nod, Naruto zipped his jacket back up. Kakashi rounded up his team and headed out of the front door. They walked through the village at a civilian's pace. They reached the village guys and were allowed to leave. As soon as they stepped out of the village border, they rocketed towards the forest. They dashed into the forest. Okay, we know that bandit camp is approximately 1,000 yards from the village. When we get to the camp, Naruto will cover the east, Sakura will cover the west, I'm to the north and Sasuke to the south. Our mission is to not to stun. Everyone in your sight is marked. Show no mercy or it will cost you your life. Kakashi said through the wireless headset. Sasuke nodded with a determined look in his eyes while Sakura seemed to hesitant. Naruto looked bored. Just another day of your average ninja dotting bandits, saving damsels in distress and being a badass. Naruto thought to himself. Shut up, brat. I'm trying to sleep. Kyuubi roared out loud. Looks like the grumpy old fox finally woke up. Have any nice dreams? Naruto asked. Yay. I was tearing you and your whole village apart. I rolled around in your blood as if it was my own personal bath. Kyuubi said. That sounds pleasant. Wish I could have taken part. But now I have some things to do, so shush. Naruto said. Team 7 suddenly broke apart with Naruto going right, Kakashi going left, Sasuke advancing while Sakura fell back. Sakura started to slow as she saw the glow of a gigantic campfire. She slowly crept through the trees and entered into a gigantic clearing. It was clearly man-made from the sight of uneven stumps and patches of dead grass. Hundreds of bandits were seen mulling around the camp. Sakura looked in shock. The man they interrogated didn't say there was this many. We seem to have been misinformed about their numbers. Switch to Plan B. Stealth attack only. Handle the stragglers first. Then handle the drunks or asleep. If possible, avoid crowds. Engage. Kakashi's voice rang through the microphone. Sakura gulped in fear and slowly pulled out a kunai. She spotted a man that was walking towards the woods. She guessed the man had to use the bathroom. She slowly made her way towards the man. She ended up behind him as he unzipped his pants. She heard a sigh of relief as the noise of running water reached her ears. Sakura slowly got closer and closer as the man continued to pee. She was about a foot away from the man before she raised her kunai. Her hands started to shake as images of the man's dead body reached her mind. Her hands came down and the blunt end of the kunai impacted against the man's temple. The man came crumbling down in a pile of flesh. I can't do it. Sakura said while shaking. She knew that they were ordered to on-site but she just couldn't. She dragged the man further into the woods and covered his body with leaves. She then advanced into the camp. She reached a tent and sneaked into it quietly. She saw 3 men asleep. The smell of alcohol reeked from the men. Sakura pulled her kunai out again. She raised it and once again her arms started to shake. Flashes of blood and the smell of death somehow reached her. Sakura slammed her kunai against the temple of each man, hoping it would keep them unconscious for a little longer. Sakura continued this process for the next hour. She would sneak into tents, knocking out the drunk bandits and slamming her kunai against the unconscious ones. Eventually she finished her side. She started to make her way into the center, hoping that her team had already met up. Her hands reached up to her headset. My side is CL. Sakura was cut off by a hand coming over her mouth. Sakura craned her neck and her eyes widened as she saw the man who she had first knocked out was currently holding her. You bitch. I should you right now. But instead I'm going to have a little fun. The man said. Sakura's eyes widened as he felt the man grope up. She bit his hand and screamed loudly. Naruto was currently having the best time of his life. He was completely in his element. The provided perfect coverage for him. Naruto saw 4 men stumbling off away from the main camp. The men were obviously beyond intoxicated. They could barely walk straight and had to lean on each other just to keep moving. Looks like I found myself some targets. Naruto said with hidden glee. Naruto jumped down from the tree he was perched in and silently dashed towards them. Kenshi was currently having the time of his life. He had joined this bandit group when he realized that it was the best option for him. They treated him like a brother and he was forever grateful for that. Kenshi was currently stumbling back to his tent with his three best friends, Kimi, Asuna and Michi. They were drunkenly blabbering about their past exploits. "Remember that time when we worked for that Gato guy?" Kenshi asked with a drunken slur. The four friends busted out in a fit of laughter. "Yay! We got so much for that town," Kimi said. The four then went into another fit of giggles. The four, however, stopped when they heard a loud snap of a branch. They turned towards the sound with a suspicious look. "Who is that?" Kenshi asked with his slur. Nobody answered. Kenshi started to inch forward as his three friends stayed back. Kenshi got to the edge of the forest and peered into the inky darkness. "Is anybody out? Whoa." Kenshi was interrupted as he was suddenly yanked into the bushes by an invisible force. The three bandits slid into a sloppy defensive stance. "Kenshi, what's wrong?" Kimi asked. The three got no response except for the ruffle of leaves. Suddenly the bush started to shake violently. A body was sent flying up into the air. The three bandits looked in shock as the dead body of Kenshi was flying through the air. Them being distracted by the flying dead body cost them their lives. Naruto dashed out bushes with his sword drawn. To the bandits, he was all just a blur. They saw a white blur approach them and then retreat into the bushes. They were confused until they felt a slight pain on their neck. The pain increased as they felt a wet sensation run down their neck. They looked down and realized that their throats were slit. They realized that they were dying because of the massive amount of blood loss they were losing. Of course, that process was sped up when Kenshi's dead body suddenly dropped onto top of them, opening the wounds even further and twisting their neck in a regular angle. They fell to the ground dead. Naruto grinned from his hiding spot. Nicked all three of their external jugular vein. "I'm getting better at this," Naruto said to himself. Naruto looked back to the bandit camp and grinned loudly. He was going to enjoy this. Naruto had been bandits for the past hours. He would separate them from the main pack, sneak into tents or just slaughter groups of them. To others, this event would be scarring, but for Naruto it was fun. Naruto just gotten finished slaughtering a tent of bandits when he heard static come through his headset. "My side is CL." There was a sudden silence as no sound came out of his headset. Naruto waited for several seconds for the person to continue but heard nothing. Suddenly a scream tore through the night, alerting Naruto and any remaining bandits. "Ah crap," Naruto said. That scream was Sakura and he knew that it probably alerted the rest of the bandits. It seems like Plan C was in action. Executing Plan C, all in sight, stealth not necessary. Meet up with closest comrade, Naruto said through his headset. Naruto walked out of the tent and saw the remaining bandits running towards the scream. Naruto grinned and spiked his chakra to a tremendous level. The bandits turned around as they felt the pressure of Naruto's chakra on them. They were greeted by the sight of pure electricity covering Naruto. He had the outline of a beast. His eyes were glowing a bright yellow. The sky above him seemed to darken. He grinned and took a deep breath. He then released a deep breath that shook all the bandits to their very core. Naruto disappeared from the bandits' sight. All in all, they were 100 strong and none of them could locate Naruto. They suddenly heard the rumble of thunder that instantly confused them. It had been a clear night 5 minutes ago. Suddenly a flash of lightning struck the middle of the group of bandits. Bodies were thrown into the air as the lightning impacted the ground. The still living bandits towards where the lightning struck and saw Naruto crouching. He suddenly dropped his sword and started to go through hand signs. The bandits started to back away, but Naruto was too fast for them. Naruto finished his hand signs and called out his jutsu. Lightning release. Massive discharge. Naruto screamed out. The bandits felt another enormous spike of chakra that seemed to crush them with its pressure. Then mayhem broke out. Tendrils of lightning came flying out of Naruto's body, incinerating the closest bandits. The ones that weren't incinerated were by the massive amount of excess electricity in their bodies. Only the farthest and the luckiest got away with only being paralyzed. Unfortunately, Naruto was not a man of mercy. He'd them with his sword, cutting their throats and impaling them with his sword. That was relaxing, Naruto said to himself. And people said I'm evil. Kyuubi said. Naruto scoffed at the comment. You go destroying mountains and attacking village just for your own amusement. Why'd these men? Because they were terrorizing that town. See the difference? Naruto said. Nope, not really. Murder is murder. Kyuubi said. Naruto sighed and decided to ignore Kyuubi. He suddenly got a weird look on his face. Oh, I forgot. Sakura was screaming. Should probably go help her. Naruto said. Naruto then started to walk towards the scream while listening a jaunty tone. Shouldn't you hurry up? Isn't your teammate in trouble? Kyuubi said. Nah, she can handle herself. Naruto said. Sasuke was very conflicted at the moment. His body was filled with a mixture of excitement, anxiety and fear. This would be the first time he would ever anyone. Flashes of the massacre that occurred years ago would occasionally come to his. These memories seemed to strengthen his resolve even more. Sasuke never wanted to feel as weak as he felt that night. His grip tightened around his kunai as the memories flashed through his mind. His eyes turned steely. Unlike his teammates, Sasuke didn't get so lucky. He didn't find any bandits wandering off from the camp. He had been slowly circling his side, waiting for an opportunity for an hour. Suddenly he heard static come through his headset. My side is CL, Sasuke heard a crash. He waited several seconds for the person to continue but heard nothing. He then shook it off as a glitch. Sasuke continued scouting the camp waiting for his opportunity. Sasuke suddenly a loud scream. He cursed as he immediately knew that the scream was Sakura's. Sasuke was about to switch to Plan C but someone beat him to it. Executing Plan C all in sight, stealth not necessary. Meet up with closest comrade. Sasuke heard Naruto said. Sasuke dropped his hands and steeled his emotions. He started to go through hand signs. He stopped at the last one and took a deep breath. He then let loose a massive fireball towards the retreating bandits. The last thing they saw and felt was a flash of flames and the intense flames only a jutsu could make. Kakashi was currently very bored. This mission, while tough for his mission, was a breeze for him. The bandits were so drunk and stupid that they were literally falling towards him. All Kakashi had to do was throw a well-placed kunai and send a shadow clone to drag the bodies into the forest. All in all, it was a pretty easy mission for Kakashi. Though one thing Kakashi worried about was his team. A team had never been assigned to a raid for their first C rank. He was scared one of them would freeze up and that would cost them their lives. But he knew he couldn't leave his post. After an hour ofing, Kakashi heard static come through his headset. My side is CL, the voice suddenly cut off. Kakashi heard a loud thump that worried him. After several seconds of waiting, Kakashi began to grow worried. Suddenly a scream ripped through the night that alerted Kakashi. Kakashi's heart started to pound as he realized that the scream was from Sakura. He was about to take off but heard a voice come through his headset. Executing Plan C all in sight, stealth not necessary. Meet up with closest comrade. Kakashi heard Naruto said. Kakashi sighed and then jumped out of the tree he was sitting in. He started to go through several hand signs before grabbing his wrist. Slowly the sound of chirping birds became evident in the air. The retreating bandits turned around and saw Kakashi charging at them with a yell. Naruto was dashing through the bandit camp, cutting down anyone in sight. He was dashing towards where he last heard the scream. Any bandit in his way stood no chance as Naruto relentlessly cut to the ground. Naruto left every one of them dead or with fatal injuries. After running for several minutes, Naruto reached the opposite end of the camp. He looked around but saw nothing but abandoned tents. Naruto suddenly heard another scream coming from one of the tent. He dashed into it with his weapon drawn. He saw one of the bandits with his dangerously close to Sakura's mouth. Juin had been having a very bad day. First he woke up late and had to wait to get a turn with one of the captured girls. So he ended up getting dirty 23rds. Second, the other bandits had stolen his portion of lunch while he was off having his fun. Third, a pink hair bitch had knocked him out and covered him with dirt and leaves. But now everything was looking up. He was about to rape the aforementioned pink hair bitch, and due to how young she looked, he could guess she was a virgin. That meant she was tight. Oh, I am going to enjoy this, Juin said to himself. Juin tried to force his into Sakura's mouth, but she would continuously move her head. Sit still, you little whore, Juin yelled. Sakura continued to move her head as Juin pressed his against her skin. Juin growled and let her arms go. He then released a punch that sent her crashing to the ground. Juin then bent down to pick Sakura up. Juin was inches away from Sakura before he felt a weird breeze against his hand. He heard a thump and looked down. His eyes widened when he saw that his hand was now separated from his arm. Juin started to scream but was silenced by a sword to the throat. He fell to the ground dead. Sakura looked up and saw Naruto standing over the now dead Juin. Tears piled into her eyes as she lunged for Naruto. Her arms wrapped around Naruto and she sobbed deeply into his chest. Naruto stood awkwardly as Sakura continued to sob. After a while, Naruto slowly pushed her away. Sakura, you need to get yourself together. We executed Plan C. We need to meet Sasuke and Kakashi in the middle of the camp, Naruto said to the hysterical girl. I thought you hated her. Why are you acting so nice? Kyuubi asked curiously. I do. But we are on a mission right now and we need her to get her shit together, Naruto said. Naruto looked down at Sakura and saw that she was still hysterical. He sighed in anger. This, Naruto said. Naruto's hand came down to Sakura's neck. She fell gently into Naruto's waiting arm. Naruto threw her over his shoulder and dashed out of the tent. Kakashi had just reached the center of the camp. He had slaughtered every single bandits that stood in his way. He saw no sight of his team, which confused and scared him. Kakashi was about to take off back into the camp to find his team before Sasuke came into his sights. Kakashi saw that Sasuke was physically okay and relaxed. Sasuke, are you okay? Kakashi asked. Sasuke gave a slow nod and Kakashi sighed as he knew the ing had somewhat affected Sasuke. Kakashi decided to deal with it once they got back to the village. Have you seen Naruto or Sakura? Kakashi asked. Sasuke gave a negative, which made Kakashi even more nervous. He gave off a long and tired sigh. Kakashi almost jumped out of his skin when he heard the loud crash of thunder coming from directly behind him. He felt a strong breeze that almost blew him off his feet. Kakashi turned around in a defensive position with a kunai drawn. He, however, relaxed when he saw that it was Naruto with Sakura thrown over his shoulder. Kakashi's eyes asked the question about what happened to Sakura, which Naruto replied to with a shrug but indicated she was fine. Kakashi let out a sigh of release. Okay, officially our mission is complete. Now all we need to do is to get rid of the camp, Kakashi said. Naruto's eyes brightened at this. Kakashi-sensei, may I do the honors? Naruto asked. Kakashi's eyebrows raised at the question. After a bit of thinking, Kakashi shrugged his shoulders saying it. Naruto handed Sakura over to Kakashi. You and Sasuke may want to step back, Naruto said. Kakashi and Sasuke retreated several feet back. Naruto waved his hand towards them and they took several more steps back. Naruto continued waving his hand and they took even more steps back. Naruto stopped when they were at the edge of the forest. Naruto, satisfied with their distance, started to go through hand signs. The whole sequence took him 30 seconds. Once he was finished, he slammed both his hand onto the ground. Lightning release. Heaven's wrath. Naruto said silently. Storm clouds started to form above Naruto as sparks came flying off of his skin. The storm clouds managed to cover the whole training ground. Naruto raised his sword to the sky as clouds started to cover. Kakashi and Sasuke looked up towards the sky and saw the gigantic clouds covering the camp. Kakashi looked confused while Sasuke looked amazed. Kakashi was wondering what Naruto was about to do. He got his answer when he heard the huge clap of thunder that seemed to shake the very earth itself. Suddenly a huge flash of light blinded both Kakashi and Sasuke, making the two avert their gazes. When the two finally managed to look back, they were greeted by a shocking sight. The bandit group that seemed to cover several hundred yards was completely gone. There was a cylinder-shaped crater that was several yards deep. Naruto stood in the middle of the crater with his clothes smoking and his sword still held up. Suddenly the two heard a loud crack. They looked towards Naruto and saw him staring in shock. His sword had broken. It seemed to excessive amount of chakra and electricity had overloaded. Naruto began to weep tears of sadness as he looked down upon his broken sword. The sword was slightly melted and broken into metallic shards. Tears continued to fall down his cheeks as he dug a small hole which he buried the shards in. He pocketed the hilt and got up. Naruto stood to his full height and stretched. He casually jumped out of the crater and walked to his shocked teammate and sensei. He stopped in front of them and looked at them with a confused look on his face. There was no evidence on his face that his beloved weapon had just broken. "What's wrong, guy? You act like you seen a ghost," Naruto said. Kakashi quickly broke out of the shock inside. He knew by now that Naruto was full of secrets. "Nothing, Naruto. Let's just head home." Team 7 was currently being sent off by a very gracious village. They had saw the bright flash of what they described to be lightning and went to investigate. They discovered that where the bandit camp used to be was now a gigantic crater. Using the rumors that circled the town was able to conclude that Team 7 was ninja and figured they took care of the bandits. They were now forever thankful. "We cannot thank you enough for what you have done for us," the mayor of the village said. Kakashi gave an eye smile and rubbed the back of his neck. "Ma, don't worry about it. It's just our job," Kakashi said. After getting an array of goodbyes, suddenly a loud scream ripped through the crowd. "Naruto-kun," a voice said. Naruto turned around and saw Mai pushing through the massive crowd of people. She eventually reached the front and Naruto saw that she had several bags packed. "Naruto, I want to go with you. And I won't take no for answer," Amai said with a determined look on her face. Naruto had told her he was going to leave tomorrow and that saddened her greatly. All through the night, she had argued with herself. Eventually she came to the decision that this town had nothing to offer. She wanted to go with Naruto. And she wouldn't take no for an answer. Okay. Naruto said nonchalantly. Team 7 and Amai looked in shock at the sudden answer. Naruto, are you sure you about this?" Kakashi asked. "Why not? My apartment is big enough for the both of us and I wouldn't mind having a roommate," Naruto said. Hearing the definite yes, tears started to pool into Amai's eyes. She ran towards Naruto and wrapped him in a massive bear hug. Naruto grinned and wholeheartedly returned the hug. He sealed Amai's bag into his ceiling tattoo and looked at his team. "Well, it's time to go home.